Chapter 1740. In an instant, the origin stone that was originally the size of a mountain turned into the size of a fist in front of Exine Junhua's disbelief. Then, with a whoosh, it drilled into Murong Yu's body and disappeared without a trace. This can't be real, right? Exine Junhua was shocked. He rubbed his eyes hard, hoping that he was hallucinating. But in reality, the chaos stone that had been there for who knew how many years had really disappeared. In the place where the primal chaos stone had been, there was only Murong Yu, who was sitting cross-legged in the void. He can take the chaos stone by reasoning with him. If I had known earlier, I would have tried to reason with him. Exine Junhua slapped his thigh in regret. However, what he did not know was that Murong Yu was definitely not the first person to be moved by the origin stone. Countless people had tried before, but those people could not move the origin stone at all. That was because they had no future. Compared to Murong Yu, their achievements were nothing. Only Murong Yu could take the chaos stone. For someone like Exine Junhua, even if he told the chaos stone about his previous life, the chaos stone would only think that he was being noisy. Murong Yu ignored the shocked Exine Junhua. He had already begun communicating with the origin stone, which was the origin stone of the Saint's world. Murong Yu, just as you said, I'm giving you a chance. I'm also giving myself a chance. I hope you won't disappoint me. A slightly old voice rang out in Murong Yu's ears. It should be the voice of the origin stone of the Saint's world. Was this guy an old man? For some reason, the little old man that Exine Junhua had described immediately appeared in Murong Yu's mind. Immediately, Murong Yu connected the little old man to the origin stone of the Saint's world. However, he did not have any evidence or connections to connect the dots. In Exine Junhua's memory, the person who had found him was a little old man. But when he wanted to describe or draw the little old man's appearance, he felt that the little old man's image had become extremely blurry. It was impossible to describe or draw. Only Exine Junhua knew what the old man looked like. This divine ability shocked Exine Junhua. With his current strength, those who could make him act like this were at least supreme being-level existences. It was precisely because of this that he had been cautious and conscientious all these years. Senior, I believe you won't be disappointed. However, I still wish to understand why you have become incomplete. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will be victorious in every battle. Murong Yu nodded and asked. At this moment, Murong Yu had already been recognized by the origin stone's origin power. However, Murong Yu didn't feel how powerful he was. There was just too little origin energy of the Saint's world that he could use, although Murong Yu was strong enough for most of the sages. However, that was not all Murong Yu wanted. He wanted to control the entire Saint's world. At the very least, the primordial chaos energy he controlled was enough to contend against a hegemon. The origin power of the Saint's world didn't answer immediately. Instead, it pondered for a long time before slowly saying, "You were right before. The current hegemon of the Saint's world isn't recognized by me. It's because he killed the previous hegemon and forcefully refined a portion of my power that he could become a hegemon. However, the current him is different from the true hegemon who could control the entire Saint's world. He can only control 30% of the Saint's world at most. However, this person's strength is extremely terrifying. Even the previous hegemon who controlled the entire Saint's world wasn't his match. In the end, he was killed by him." Murong Yu frowned slightly. His heart immediately sank. Of course, he knew how powerful heaven was. However, heaven seemed to be even more powerful than he had imagined. Even the hegemon who controlled the entire Saint's world was killed by him. Just how powerful was he? One had to know that even if an ordinary great sage controlled the Saint's world, he could use the origin power of the Saint's world to easily kill primal chaos ancestor sages, or even supreme beings on the Saint rankings. What more hegemon? Terrifying. This was Murong Yu's evaluation of heaven's strength. Indeed, this was the only word that was suitable. Due to some unknown reason, after the previous hegemon was killed by heaven, I was forcefully split into 9 parts. At that time, all 8 of my copies escaped and fled to different places. Only 1/9 of them was refined by heaven. All these years, heaven has never given up on searching for me. Back then, he even found me. However, I'm different from the other 8 parts. He can't refine me at all. As a result, he left in the end. As it turned out, the Hegeman had tried to take the Origin Stone, but failed. This was not a legend. It had actually happened. However, after so many years, he's already found a few other parts. I don't know how many he's found for now. However, he's already refined 3/9, which is 1/3. Once he refines more than 5 Origin Stones, he'll have the ability to refine me. Even if he doesn't refine me, he'll be able to control the entire Saint's world with the amount of Origin power he controls. When that time comes, even if you refine 4 Origin Stones, you won't be his opponent at all. Of course, if you want to defeat heaven, you won't be able to defeat him even if you receive the acknowledgement of all my power. As a result, you have to become even stronger. Refining the Origin Stones will only cancel out a portion of heaven's power. Therefore, you must refine the 5 Origin Stones before the heavens. Otherwise, you'll definitely die. The ancient voice of the Saint's world's origin kept ringing in Murong Yu's mind. However, Murong Yu's heart grew heavier and heavier. Now, Heaven Sky had refined 3 Source Stones, and he had only refined 1. Perhaps Heaven was refining the 4th Origin Stone now. Perhaps he had already discovered even more Origin Stones. However, Murong Yu had only discovered 1 Origin Stone, which was 1/9 of the Origin Stone. Senior, do you know where the rest of your Origin Stones are? Murong Yu could not help but ask in anticipation. However, the Saint's world's origin mercilessly shattered his expectations. I have no way of knowing either. Perhaps I'll be able to sense it within a certain distance of the remaining Origin Stones. Right now, I can't sense anything. Murong Yu was instantly disappointed. However, that was all. It was already much better than before. Previously, he did not expect to receive the acknowledgement of the Saint's world's origin. Now, he could at least cancel out a portion of heaven's power. Senior, look at me. I'm only a rank 3 chaotic ancestor saint now. The difference between my strength and heaven's is too great. Shouldn't you do something for me? Help me raise my cultivation level casually? I'm not asking for much. Just raise me to rank 9 chaotic ancestor saint. After a while, Murong Yu chuckled. If you were in your complete state, not to mention rank 9 chaotic ancestor saint, even becoming an honorable saint wouldn't be a problem. But now, I'm sorry. I don't have that ability anymore. The Saint's world's origin dealt another blow to Murong Yu. Murong Yu was speechless. Then if I refine you and receive your acknowledgement, won't there be no benefits at all? Why won't there be any benefits? After obtaining my approval, you'll be able to refine Origin Stones effortlessly when you encounter one in the future. Moreover, aren't you able to control the world around you now? You can control 1/9 of the Saint's world now. Within this 1/9 of the Saint's world, you're the absolute ruler. Murong Yu rolled his eyes. However, he was pleasantly surprised. How big was 1/9 of the Saint world? Murong Yu did not know for now. However, he knew that the entire human territory was far less than 1/9 of the Saint's world. In other words, Murong Yu could control the entire human territory now. He could control a part of the Saint's world. This is equivalent to a domain. Murong Yu suddenly exclaimed in his heart. A domain was a sacred ability, a saint art, using one's power to form a small independent space nearby. In that space, one would be the absolute ruler. However, the range of the domain was not large. Murong Yu could form it too. However, he had not used it all along. He did not need it at all to deal with people with weaker strength. However, he did not need it to deal with people with similar strength. However, Murong Yu's current huge domain had extremely terrifying power. Within the domain, even a number 1 expert on the Saints ranking could not kill him. On the contrary, Murong Yu could even kill the other party. Most importantly, within this domain, Murong Yu was the absolute ruler. He could know anything that happened within the domain. As long as it was within the domain, nothing could escape Murong Yu's eyes. For example, Song Tian, who was hiding in the human territory. For example, Feng Sanxiong, who appeared and disappeared unpredictably and wanted to kill Murong Yu at all times. As long as they were within the domain, Murong Yu only needed a thought to discover them. Moreover, although I can't raise your realm to rank 9 Chaotic Ancestor Saint Realm, I can raise your realm by 1 level. I can still raise you to rank 4 Chaotic Ancestor Saint Realm. While Murong Yu was pleasantly surprised, the origin of the Saint's world spoke again. Murong Yu was really wild with joy now. Originally, his strength was comparable to the number 4 on the Saint's ranking. If he could raise it by another level, he would be comparable to the number 7 on the Saint's ranking, Dongmen Li Xuan. Coupled with treasures like the Xianyuan sword and the ability of the domain, Murong Yu was even confident to fight the number 2 on the Saint's ranking. However, Murong Yu did not let joy get to his head. Who knew how long it would take to break through this time? If he were to break through here, he might be killed in the process. Therefore, he left this place with Xi and Junhua and returned to the headquarters of the Saints' Hall. After Murong Yu left, those experts who originally controlled the area around the Origin Stone charged over with murderous intent. However, what was left for them was only chaos. As for Murong Yu and the Origin Stone, they had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1741. News of the disappearance of the Chaos Gem spread through the entire chaotic layer overnight. In response to this, the crowd only smiled non-committally when they heard the news. They simply couldn't believe that the Chaos Gems would suddenly disappear. However, when many people went there personally and discovered that the Chaos Gem was really gone, they all believed it. However, where did the Chaos Gem go? It was definitely not one of those organizations who worked together to take it away. They did not have the strength to do so. It must have been those 2 people who took it away. Someone thought of Murong Yu and Xi and Junhua before the Chaos Gem disappeared. As a result, the 2 of them became the main suspects. There was no doubt that the Chaos Gem was indeed taken away by Murong Yu. However, the crowd didn't believe it. Moreover, when they wanted to find Murong Yu and Xi and Junhua, they were shocked to discover that they did not. They had no impression of the 2 of them at all. This was because Murong Yu and Xi and Junhua had changed their appearances before going there. With their strength, no one could see through their disguises apart from sovereigns. Where are the sovereigns now? However, Murong Yu would definitely attract the attention of the sovereigns after taking away the Chaos Gem. However, the sovereigns had disappeared from the Saints' world many years ago. Murong Yu was not afraid. Even if the sovereigns appeared, it would be extremely difficult for them to see through their disguises as long as no one was present. While everyone was shocked, Murong Yu had already ordered the assassins of the Hallowed Execution Hall to begin searching for the Origin Stones in the chaotic layer. Of course, Murong Yu did not let go of the Saints' world. The origin energy of the Saints' world had once told Murong Yu that the origin energy that had split into 9 did not all exist in the endless chaos. It could have fallen somewhere in the Saints' world. As the most powerful assassin organization in the Saints' world, the Hallowed Execution Hall's intelligence network was the best in the Saints' world. However, even so, they had never seen a second origin stone. This made Murong Yu's heart heavy. Refining it was not a problem. The problem was that he did not know where the other origin stones were. Of course, all of this was done by the intelligence department of the Saint Execution Hall. Murong Yu had already entered the Hichu Luoshu and began to receive the power of the origin stone to break through to the 4th Order Primal Chaos Ancestor Saint Realm. This origin stone of mine is formed from 1/9 of my origin energy and a large amount of chaos energy. As long as you refine it, it should be able to raise your strength by a small realm. As soon as Murong Yu entered Hichu Luoshu, the slightly aged voice of the origin of the holy world sounded in his mind. Ever since he admitted that he was Murong Yu had revealed some information about himself to him. As a result, the origin energy of the Saints' world believed that the origin energy stone could only increase Murong Yu's strength by a minor level. If it were anyone else, it wouldn't be a problem for them to rise from level 1 to level 9. However, the amount of power required by Murong Yu was simply too terrifying. Of course, there weren't many people like Murong Yu who could directly refine the power of objects to increase their strength. Murong Yu nodded and appeared near the Origin Stone. He immediately began to refine the Origin Stone that was the size of a mountain. Murong Yu was already experienced in this, so he didn't feel any pressure refining the Origin Stone at all. Therefore, as time passed, the Origin Source Stone continued to shrink. On the contrary, Murong Yu's strength continued to increase. However, even though he had the immense power of the Origin Stone to increase his strength, it still wasn't enough. Murong Yu's cultivation level couldn't be broken through just because he wanted to. Time flowed like water, and 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. After 1,000 years, Murong Yu's Origin Stone had been refined until only the core was left. It was the size of a fist. However, the power contained in the core was comparable to all the power of the Origin Stone that had been refined previously. At that moment, Murong Yu's cultivation level had reached the peak of level 3. He was just one step away from breaking through to level 4. Finally, on this day, Murong Yu's body trembled violently, and an aura that was more than 10 times stronger than before erupted from his body. It instantly enveloped the entire Hichu Luo Shu. Crack! Just as Murong Yu's body erupted with a powerful aura, the Origin Stone's core in his hand also turned into fine powder and shattered. Level 4 Chaotic Ancestor Saint. Swoosh! When Murong Yu broke through, his name that was originally 80,000 on the Saint leaderboard jumped again. It jumped to 70,000 in an instant and squeezed the original 70,000 person down. Murong Yu, isn't that the leader of the Human Race Alliance? He actually disappeared without a trace in the past 1,000 years. Did he go into seclusion to cultivate? If he doesn't come out, the Human Race Alliance will be wiped out. Someone sneered when they saw Murong Yu's ranking on the Saint leaderboard skyrocketing. It's only 70,000 on the Saint leaderboard. It's useless even if he comes out now. The annihilation of the Human Race Alliance is certain. They can't even withstand a single blow. I didn't expect the human race to have fallen to such a state. The sacred race and the demon race have joined forces and marched forward. The Human Race Alliance has retreated again and again. The human race's top Saint leaderboard experts haven't appeared at all. I heard that many of the human race's Saint leaderboard experts have been ambushed and killed by the sacred race and the demon race. Otherwise, the human race wouldn't have been defeated overnight. Someone sighed, but his tone was filled with schadenfreude. That's because the Saint leaderboard experts in the Chaos Layer haven't returned. Otherwise, how could the human race be so weak? A human race Saint leaderboard expert was displeased. Are you joking? Do the human race have more Saint leaderboard experts than the sacred race and the demon race? If the human race's Saint leaderboard experts dare to return, wouldn't the other two races' Saint leaderboard experts not return? If that's the case, it'll only accelerate the human race's defeat. Someone sneered. The Saint leaderboard expert fell silent. It was because of this reason that the Saint leaderboard experts in the Chaos Layer were forbidden from going to the Sacred Realm to help. Otherwise, it would only accelerate the human race's destruction. This made many human race experts extremely sullen, but there was nothing they could do. Previously, my strength was equivalent to the 8th on the Saint leaderboard. Now, I'm probably equivalent to the 7th on the Saint leaderboard. I can even fight the 6th on the Saint leaderboard head-on. If I borrow the power of the Xinyuan sword, I might even be able to fight the 2nd on the Saint leaderboard. I wonder how big the gap is between me and the 1st on the Saint leaderboard? Murong Yu pondered. After his strength increased, he didn't immediately leave Hichu Luo Shu. Instead, he cultivated for a while and practiced all the cultivation methods and battle skills he cultivated. After familiarizing himself with his new strength, he left Hichu Luo Shu and appeared at the Saint Execution Hall's headquarters. Murong Yu, you finally appeared. If you didn't appear, the human race would have been destroyed. As soon as Murong Yu appeared, Exai Junhua immediately appeared beside him and said anxiously. Murong Yu's expression changed drastically. The first thing he thought of was that the sacred race and the demon race had finally attacked the human race. However, with the human race's strength, the sacred race and the demon race couldn't possibly destroy the human race. What's going on? Murong Yu looked at Xian Junhua with a gloomy expression. Xian Junhua didn't even bother to speak. He just pointed at Murong Yu and transmitted his memories of what had happened in the past 1,000 years to him. Reading his memories was much faster, and the amount of information he obtained was much greater. As the former hall master of the Saint Execution Hall, Xian Junhua's information was very detailed. In an instant, Murong Yu knew in detail what had happened to the human race in the past 1,000 years. A few decades after he went into seclusion, the sacred race joined forces with the demon race and launched a war against the human race. Although the human race was prepared, their strength was far inferior to the combined forces of the sacred race and the demon race. The human race was defeated immediately. They retreated again and again. Countless human race experts were massacred by the sacred race and the demon race in the Great War. Blood flowed like a river. This was war. The sacred race and the demon race launched a war against the human race with the goal of destroying the human race and then occupying the human race's territory. Therefore, they didn't show any mercy. From the elderly to the children, no one was spared. The great alliance of the human race had only been established for a short period of time. The 108 divisions only put up a symbolic resistance before they were defeated. There was no other way. The 108 divisions were heavily taken care of by the sacred race and the demon race. In addition, the 108 divisions had only been established for a short period of time. They weren't strong at all. Therefore, it was normal for them to fail. However, even though they were defeated, the 108 divisions didn't flee. Instead, they fought and fled, slowly retreating towards the headquarters of the Great Alliance of the human race. During this process, the 108 divisions also helped the other human race ages to retreat. This made Murong Yu feel very gratified. His teachings didn't lose their effect. Apart from the Great Alliance of the human race, the actions of the other sacred lands made Murong Yu furious. Apart from the Purple Thunder Palace that had submitted to the Great Alliance of the human race and suffered heavy losses, only the Unparalleled Palace participated in the war. However, the participation of only 2 sacred lands didn't have any effect on the war situation. On the contrary, the 2 sacred lands suffered heavy losses. The other sacred lands, apart from the cloud-piercing island that Murong Yu still held captive, the True Martial Temple, Bailuo Palace, Nine Cauldron Sect, and others closed their sacred lands as soon as they heard the news of the sacred race and the demon race's invasion. They didn't send a single disciple to resist. They only wanted to protect their own sacred lands. This made the hearts of the human race turn cold. Even some of the forces that belonged to the other sacred lands directly announced that they were no longer related to those sacred lands. It was too shameful, too shameless. In 1,000 years, the Great Alliance of the human race had suffered heavy losses. However, there were also many people who rose rapidly in the war. This was especially so for Murong Yu's brothers like Fan Tong, Murong Xian, and some of Shenzhen's core disciples like Zhang Ao and Duan Muqing. Not only did their strength increase, but they also made great achievements in battle and had extremely high prestige in the human race. On the contrary, Murong Yu's prestige fell to the lowest point in history. There was no helping it. Who asked him to not appear for 1,000 years? Chapter 1742. As the leader of the Human Race Alliance, Murong Yu should have led the human experts to resist the invasion of the sacred race and Yao race. But Murong Yu, the leader of the Human Race Alliance, hadn't appeared since the war began. He had disappeared for 1,000 years. Shenzhen and the higher-ups of the Human Race Alliance had come out to refute the rumors, saying that Murong Yu was at a critical juncture in seclusion and couldn't come out for the time being. But even so, Murong Yu's prestige had fallen to rock bottom. This made Murong Yu feel somewhat helpless. At the same time, he also knew that as a leader, as long as he didn't appear at critical times, the ordinary people would still resent him greatly. Of course, Murongyu was gratified that his prestige in Shenzhen hadn't changed at all, let alone 1,000 years. Even if he didn't appear for an entire epoch, Shenzhen's disciples would still worship Murongyu. These damned sacred lands. This time, I'll make them disappear completely. When he thought of the performance of the sacred lands, Murongyu's anger exploded. 6 sacred lands. If the 6 sacred lands had brought supreme artifacts to resist the invasion of the sacred race and Yao race, the human race would still have been defeated. But it definitely wouldn't have been like today, where corpses littered the ground. In just 1,000 years, the human race had lost 80% of their territory. Now, countless human saints were holed up in the final 20% of their territory. If this continued, the human race wouldn't even need a few hundred years to defend the final 20% of their territory. At that time, apart from a few people who could escape with their lives, everyone else would be mercilessly slaughtered. And in the sacred world, there would be no place for the human race to stand. There wouldn't even be a human race left. This was something that Murongyu absolutely couldn't tolerate. The actions of the 6 sacred lands made Murongyu feel even more hatred. What was the difference between their actions and the invading sacred race and Yao race? There was no difference at all. Xi and Junhua, keep a close eye on the experts on the saint rankings in the chaos layer. Once they descend to the lower realm, inform me immediately. Murongyu looked at Xi and Junhua with a gloomy face and murderous aura. Xi and Junhua nodded and said hesitantly, Murongyu, should we take some of the saint ranking experts with us? Although Murongyu was strong, Xi and Junhua didn't think that Murongyu alone could turn the tide and drive out the invading saint race and demon race. However, what they didn't know was that not only did Murongyu drive the 2 sacred clans away, he also wanted to trample them under his feet. Didn't they want to exterminate the human race? That's great. I'll give you a taste of your own medicine. Murongyu wanted to enter the holy world together. If these races were stubborn, Murongyu wouldn't mind slaughtering them. After all, they had already slaughtered a large number of humans in their invasion this time. Murongyu shook his head and took a step forward, disappearing from the chaos layer. Pass down the order. All assassins must rush back to the headquarters or the branch. The holy world will be in chaos. History might be rewritten. Xi and Junhua sensed Murongyu's thoughts and immediately sent out orders. After leaving the chaos layer, Murongyu appeared in the Human Race Alliance on Tiangang Mountain. However, the current atmosphere in the Human Race Alliance made him frown. It was depressing, gloomy, and filled with pessimism. With such morale, even if they didn't go to war, it wouldn't benefit the Saints at all. Once a war broke out, it would be difficult for the human race not to be defeated. With a sweep of his divine perception, Murongyu discovered the situation in the Human Race Alliance. Other than the experts on the Saint rankings in the Human Race Alliance, there were a large number of injured people. Not many of the remaining experts were here. They were probably fighting the Saint race and Demon race at the front lines. Murongyu's 5 wives were all in the Human Race Alliance. As for Murong Xian, Murong Lin, Fan Tong, Little Lion King, and the others, they weren't here. They were probably at the front lines. With a step, Murongyu appeared in the main hall. Other than him, Zhao Jiqing and the other 2 women were all here. However, Zhao Jiqing and the others all had gloomy expressions. This was because they had just received news that the front lines continued to be defeated. Countless human experts had died. There were even experts on the Saint rankings who had died. There weren't many experts on the Saint rankings in the Human Race Alliance. Every death was one less. Every death was a huge loss. How could Zhao Jiqing and the others not feel heavy? In addition, before the war, some powerful experts on the Saint rankings in the Human Race Alliance had been assassinated by the Saint race and Demon race. If not for this, the human race wouldn't have been defeated so easily. From the experts on the Saint rankings to the ordinary saints, the human race had suffered heavy losses this time. If my husband was here, we wouldn't be so passive. Situ Xian sighed and said in a low voice. Zhao Jiqing and the others nodded in agreement. Murongyu wasn't powerful just because of his strength. His sense of the big picture and his outstanding ability to fight were things that they could never hope to match. Moreover, as long as Murong appeared, he could raise the morale of the Human Race Alliance. Most importantly, the human race had never won a battle since the beginning of the war. The human race yearned for a victory. Seeing that the 5 women had become very haggard because of worry, Murong couldn't help but feel a little sorry for them. Thus, he said, "I'm back." Hearing Murong's words, the 5 women finally reacted. Looking in the direction of the voice, they were pleasantly surprised when they saw that it was Murong. Absence made the heart grow fonder. Murong really wanted to spend some time with the 5 women. However, now wasn't the time. Thus, he only nodded slightly and said, "What's the situation now?" The 6 sacred lands are still holed up. Some of the sacred lands have been surrounded by the demon race and sacred race armies. However, the sacred race and demon race's main forces are still dealing with the Human Race Alliance. At this time, the Human Race Alliance only has 20% of its territory left. Here, the human race experts have engaged in a life-and-death battle with the demon race and sacred race experts. Under Li Ling's command, we've managed to hold on to the last 20% of our territory with great difficulty. However, we've suffered too many casualties. Moreover, the sacred race and demon race don't want to push us too hard. They haven't attacked by force and are only slowly chipping away at our strength. Under such circumstances, we can only hold on for a few hundred years. If one were to describe the current situation of the human race, it would be very dangerous. There's a possibility of being uprooted at any time. After understanding the situation with the 5 women, Murong already had a plan in mind. Continue to guard the Human Race Alliance. Since I'm back, the human race will be fine. I'll slowly settle this score with the demon race and sacred race. As he spoke, Murong gently kissed the 5 women on their foreheads. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. After he left, his voice drifted over. "Rest well. As long as I'm here, the human race will be fine." The Skyfall mountain range was a huge mountain range in the human race's territory. However, although the mountain range was long, there weren't many saints who set foot here in peacetime. This was because there were many powerful beasts in the mountain range. Ordinary people who set foot here would only be torn apart by the beasts. But now there were countless saints gathered in the mountain range. This was the front line of the human race's retreat. At this moment, the 2 armies were confronting each other. In fact, it wasn't right to call it confrontation. To be precise, the human race's army was stubbornly resisting the sacred race and demon race's army. Moreover, the sacred race and demon race's army had more saints than the human race in terms of the number of saints on the saint rankings. If it weren't for the fact that the sacred race and demon race were only carrying out a strategy of slowly nibbling away at the human race's territory, they would have attacked long ago. At this moment, in a huge plain in front of the mountain, the 2 armies were gathered together, facing each other across the air. In the middle of the 2 armies, 2 powerhouses were engaged in a great battle. Power surged, and saint lights soared into the sky, causing the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. However, one of them was obviously stronger than the other. Kill those ungrateful bastards from the demon race. On the human race's side, many powerhouses roared, their faces red with anger. They all looked like they wanted to rush out and beat up the demon race powerhouse. If Murong was here, he would realize that one of the 2 powerhouses in the battle was a demon race powerhouse. The other was his son, Murong. In 1,000 years, Murong had become even more powerful. At this moment, he was suppressing the demon race powerhouse on the saint rankings. Die! Murong suddenly let out a loud roar. A brilliant golden light suddenly erupted from his body like a small sun. Heavenly King Grand Sage Technique. Murong roared in his heart and directly used the Heavenly King Hall's secret technique. Suddenly, his opponent was caught off guard, and his mind was momentarily distracted. On the other hand, Murong seized the opportunity and rushed forward. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the demon race powerhouse's shoulders. Then he tore it apart. Rip! The demon clan cultivator's physical body and even his soul were torn to shreds by Murong-Yi. The demon race powerhouse on the Saint rankings was killed. Great! Thunderous cheers erupted from the human side. Rumble. While everyone was cheering for Murong-Yi, a terrifying saint light burst out from the depths of the sacred race and demon race armies. Then it tore through the void at lightning speed, locked onto Murong-Yi, and attacked fiercely. Not good. On the human race's side, Murong-Yi Xian and the other saint rankings powerhouses' expressions changed drastically, and they roared in their hearts. They couldn't help but burst out with their fastest speed and attack, rushing out of the crowd and towards Murong-Yi Xian. They knew how despicable the sacred race and demon race were. They had used this method to kill many human race powerhouses on the saint rankings several times in the past. This was at least the joint attack of hundreds of saint rankings powerhouses. Although Murong-Yi Xian was powerful, he definitely couldn't withstand this attack. At this moment, Murong-Yi Xian had already reacted. However, it was already too late. That force had already bombarded the air above his head. Although the force had not yet crushed down, it was already too late. Although it hadn't hit him yet, the aura had already caused Murong-Yi Xian's soul to tremble. It was too late to escape now, and Murong-Yi Xian and the others wouldn't be able to arrive in time to rescue him. Am I, Murong-Yi Xian, going to be killed just like that? Murong-Yi Xian suddenly had this sad thought. Chapter 1743. No. Seeing this, Murong Xian, Li Ling, Zhang Ao, and the others in the human race camp all roared at the sky, their eyes wide open. Losing a Saint leaderboard expert was a huge loss for the Human Race Alliance. If they lost a few more, the Human Race Alliance would basically be crippled. Murong-Yi's status was much higher than ordinary Saint leaderboard experts. He was an expert on the Saint leaderboard, and he was Murong-Yi's son. If he really died, it would be a huge blow to the Human Race Alliance. Moreover, once Murong-Yi returned, Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, and the others would not be able to answer to Murong-Yi. Could they only say to Murong-Yi, "Sorry, we didn't take good care of Murong-Yi and let him die"? It should be known that they were only where they were today because of Murong-Yi. Murong-Yi had done them a great favor, but they couldn't even protect Murong-Yi's son. Murong Xian and the others rushed out one by one to Murong-Yi, wanting to save Murong-Yi. However, the sacred race and the demon race's sudden ambush had already planned to kill him. Murong Xian and the others couldn't rescue him in time. Hence, they could only watch helplessly as that incomparably terrifying power shattered the void, enveloped Murong-Yi, and ruthlessly strangled him. Murong-Yi was definitely going to die. Under the impact of this terrifying power, he would probably be blasted to pieces. Sacred race and demon race. One day, I will exterminate you. Murong Xian stopped in his tracks, two streams of blood flowing from his eyes as he roared at the sky. Amidst the power, Murong-Yi's face suddenly revealed a smile of relief. If I die like this, perhaps this is the legendary sacrifice for the country. My death is heavier than Mount Tai. Smack! Just as Murong-Yi was about to say these words, he felt his head being violently slapped by a large palm. The huge power almost slapped him deep into the ground. Murong-Yi couldn't help but feel a little strange. Although this power was huge, it didn't have much killing intent. It didn't seem to be the power of the sacred race and the demon race. But if it wasn't that power, then what was it? Murong-Yi felt extremely strange, and at this time, a familiar feeling appeared in his heart. Brat, if I don't let you die, you dare to die in front of me? Do you believe that I won't kill you? A voice suddenly sounded in Murong-Yi's ears. At the same time, a tall figure appeared in Murong-Yi's sight. Murong-Yi was instantly agitated, but he quickly regained his composure and smiled wryly. Am I hallucinating? Father actually appeared, father. Murong-Yi was speechless when he saw Murong-Yi mumbling to himself. How was this guy hallucinating? He was clearly real, okay? Brat, I'll deal with you later. Murong-Yi slapped Murong-Yi's head again. At the same time, he looked up. At this time, the power had already come down. Murong Yu's face showed a disdainful smile. Although this power was terrifying, it was too far away from the power of the Purple Thunderhall's people. Moreover, Murong Yu's strength was not the same as when he took on the combined power of the Purple Thunderhall's people, even if Murong Yu's strength was the same as before. But now, he had refined a part of the sacred world's source energy. In this area, he was the ruler. Therefore, this power that was terrifying in the eyes of others was nothing in his eyes. Boom! Without saying anything, Murong Yu directly punched out. Murong Yu's fist, which had been launched later, arrived first and landed directly on the incoming energy. At this moment, it was as if time had stopped. But very quickly, that force exploded with a boom. What's going on? They saw that the power that came down with great momentum had actually disappeared without a trace, and there was only an incomparably huge fist left. Everyone present was shocked. Every one of them looked at that huge fist with a shocked expression. Which expert had arrived? This was the strength that only the top 3 ruthless experts on the Saint rankings had, right? Or was it a supreme being expert? Father. While the crowd was still in shock, Murong, he had already reacted and let out a loud roar. At this moment, this fellow finally reacted. It turned out that this wasn't an illusion. Murong Yu had really appeared. He had appeared in time to block the attack for him, saving his life. Immediately, Murong Yu was so excited that he almost fainted. It was partly because he had escaped death, and partly because he had seen Murong Yu. He knew that after Murong Yu's appearance, the situation of the war would probably be rewritten. There was hope for the human clan. Father, Master, Holy Lord, Alliance Leader. At this moment, many experts of the human clan in the distance finally reacted. Therefore, they were filled with excitement like Murong Yi. In fact, Murong Yi Xian, Li Ling, and the others even flew over. The Alliance Leader of the human clan had rushed back in time and saved Murong Yi. Many people of the Holy Clan and Monster Clan had never seen Murong Yu before. But at this moment, how could they not know that the black-robed young man who had shattered the power they had been accumulating for a long time was the legendary Alliance Leader of the human clan? However, wasn't Murong Yu only ranked 70,000 on the Saint rankings? How could he have such terrifying power? For a moment, the hearts of the Holy Clan and Monster Clan sank. Murong Yu did not even look at them. However, they felt an extremely heavy pressure coming from Murong Yu's body. A terrifying, murderous intent constantly erupted from Murong Yu, suppressing them until they could not breathe. I'm back. From today onwards, leave these monsters of the Holy Clan and Monster Clan to me. Murong Yu glanced at Murong Xian and the human army behind him, then said in a deep voice, "We humans must pay with blood." Suddenly, there was an earth-shattering cheer from the human clan army. They didn't know why, but when they saw Murong Yu, their originally low morale skyrocketed. For a moment, their morale was high, and they all believed that Murong Yu had returned. Then, Murong Yu could lead them to defeat the Holy Clan and Monster Clan army. Murong Yu gestured to the human clan army with his hands, then turned to look at the Holy Clan and Monster Clan army opposite him, then slowly rose into the air. As for Murong, Yi Xian, and the others, they also slowly rose into the air and followed behind Murong Yu, unable to hide the excitement on their faces. Who attacked just now? I hope you will step forward and not make me do it. If I do, the result may not be what you want to see. Murong Yu coldly glanced at the Monster Clan and Holy Clan army, then said indifferently, "Pressure." Murong Yu only glanced at them, and the Holy Clan and Monster Clan army felt an immense pressure acting on them. They all knew that this was Murong Yu's pressure, the pressure of a single sentence. Murong Yu, you're only a powerhouse ranked 70,000 on the Saint rankings. What's so great about you? If you know what's good for you, quickly surrender with the Human Clan Alliance and become our slaves. If you do that, we might let you live without purpose. Otherwise, your human clan will completely disappear from the holy world. In the past, there were supreme being powerhouses, so we did not dare to kill you all. But now that the supremes have yet to appear, the heavens must be out to destroy your human race. A sacred race expert with a relatively high ranking stepped out and sneered at Muronyu. Originally, many people from the Holy Clan and Monster Clan were scared stiff by Muronyu. But when they heard the Saint Ranking's powerhouse's words, they thought about it carefully. Wasn't Muronyu like this? What was there to be afraid of? As a result, they were emboldened. They all sneered at Muronyu, their faces full of disdain. Muronyu didn't get angry. On the contrary, a smile appeared on his face as he looked at the sacred race expert. Which sacred race are you from? What's your name? The Holy Clan powerhouse revealed a brilliant smile. Just as he was about to report his race and name, he saw an incomparably huge fist pierce through the sky and appear directly in front of him. Then, he felt his vision darken. The incomparably huge finger had already gently poked his head. At that moment, the powerhouse on the Saint Rankings heard a dull thud before he lost consciousness. To outsiders, this person had already been poked to death by the incomparably huge finger. And the owner of the finger was Muronyu. In everyone's eyes, Muronyu did not do anything. All he did was gently poke his finger out. It doesn't matter what race you are, what name you are, or what status you have. Only death awaits those who offend me. Muronyu retracted his finger, flicked it, and said coldly. The Holy Clan and Monster Clan people felt a chill in their hearts. It turned out that Muronyu had asked the dead Holy Clan powerhouse not because he wanted to know his identity, but because his last sentence was the main point. Unfortunately, the Holy Clan powerhouse could not hear it, because that person was completely dead. Hundreds of Holy Clan powerhouses joined forces to deal with an ordinary Holy Clan powerhouse of the Human Clan. You Monster Clan and Holy Clan really think highly of the Human Clan. Muronyu said again. Everyone fell silent. Even the humans were the same. Then, they all looked at Muronyu speechlessly. This father and son are really too weird. This thought surfaced in everyone's mind. Was Muronyu an ordinary Holy Clan powerhouse? This guy was really awesome. Holy Clan powerhouses of the same level were no match for him at all. They would be beaten to death with just a few punches and kicks. Murongyu's strength could surpass 20,000 Holy Clan powerhouses. In other words, if Murongyu's ranking was only 100,000, then he had the ability to kill 80,000 Holy Clan powerhouses. Chapter 1744. While everyone was speechless at Muronyu, Muronyu made his move. He slowly reached out his hand and grabbed at the Sacred Clan and Monster Race troops. Seeing Muronyu make his move, the Human Race Alliance, especially Shenzhen's disciples, were all looking forward to it. However, their opponents, the Monster Race and Sacred Clan, were all looking at him with disdain. Muronyu was indeed powerful, but could he fight against their entire army? There were hundreds of millions of sage experts. There were hundreds of sage experts. Did he think he could fight them all by himself? That was utter nonsense. Seeing their expressions, Muronyu sneered in his heart. If he wanted them dead, he could kill them all with just a thought. Although it would be satisfying to kill them, it wouldn't be able to achieve the result Muronyu wanted. He needed to intimidate them. He needed more people to see his true strength. Hence, under the disdainful gazes of the Sacred Clan and Monster Race, Muronyu's large hand suddenly clenched into a fist. That's all you've got. The Sacred Clan and Monster Race experts looked even more disdainful. However, their smiles soon froze. Because at that moment, whoosh, 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 among the crowd, several hundred experts on the Saint Rankings suddenly felt an extremely powerful force acting on them. That force was like an incomparably strong rope, firmly trapping him. Before they could react, that force had already pulled them up into the sky. An expert on the Saint Rankings finally reacted and exclaimed. Then he exploded with an extremely powerful force, trying to break the force that was entangling him. However, that force was indestructible. No matter how he struggled and tried to break it, it didn't budge at all. In fact, that force even broke through the void and pulled him towards Muronyu. That was Muronyu's method. The expert on the Saint Rankings was shocked, and the others were shocked as well. Whoosh, 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 streaks of light continuously soared into the sky from the crowd, smashed through the void, and shot toward Murong Yu. These streaks of light were all experts on the Saint rankings. Everyone from the Sacred Race and Monster Race knew that the Saint ranking experts who had turned into streaks of light and rushed towards Murong Yu were the hundreds of Saint ranking experts who had tried to kill Murong Yi. Now, Murong Yu had only stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air, and they were all experts on the Saint rankings? How big was the gap in strength between the two sides? What level had Murong Yu's strength reached? How could it be so terrifying? Terrifying. It was too perverted. Behind Murong Yu, the members of the Human Race Alliance were shocked at first. Then, they erupted into cheers that filled the sky. On the other hand, many of the saints from the Sacred Clan and Demon Clan had ashen faces, and their eyes were filled with fear. They all looked at Murong Yu in horror, not daring to attack Murong Yu, nor did they dare to escape. They just stared blankly at Murong Yu. Murong Yu, you're courting death. The human race will die. A Sacred Race expert who had been pulled to the front by Murong Yu knew that he couldn't escape from Murong Yu's entanglement, so he said ferociously. Murong Yu wasn't angry. I don't know if the human race will die or not for the time being, but you're dead meat. As he spoke, Murong Yu glanced at that person. Soon after, the person exploded with a bang and turned into a cloud of blood mist. He then disappeared into the void, not leaving behind even a trace of him. An expert on the Saint rankings was dead. Murong Yu killed him with a single glance. Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, all of them extremely shocked by Murong Yu's strength. Seeing everyone's expressions, Murong Yu was very satisfied. He knew that his actions today would definitely shock the entire sacred world, and many people would be stunned. However, Murong Yu's gaze didn't have such terrifying power. That expert on the Saint rankings wasn't killed by his gaze. Murong Yu had only used the sacred world's origin energy, and then used the power of the laws of space to kill him. You dare to kill someone from the Sacred Clan? You're dead meat. The human race will die. After that expert died, another Sacred Race expert roared. Is that so? Murong Yu smiled and glanced at him, and this person was the same as the previous one. With a bang sound, he exploded into pieces. He couldn't be more dead. After killing 2 people in a row, this merciless method finally made the hundreds of Sacred Race experts understand that they were meat on the chopping block. Murong Yu really dared to kill them. In fact, Murong Yu didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure when killing them like dogs. Therefore, they fell silent, because they all knew that if they spoke, the next person to die might be them. Stinking brat, come here. Murong Yu ignored them and turned to Murong Yi. Murong Yi scratched his head and walked over with a smile. Father, I wonder what's the matter? Do you want me to kill these enemies with my own hands? As he spoke, Murong Yi rubbed his hands and looked at the hundreds of Sacred Race experts with murderous intent. The hundreds of Sacred Race experts felt a chill in their hearts. They all felt Murong Yi's monstrous killing intent. He definitely dared to kill them, and all of them. Bang! Before Murong Yi could finish his sentence, Murong Yu hit his head hard. At the same time, Murong Yu's voice sounded in his ears. Stinking brat, is killing the only thing in your heart? How many of these people do you want to choose? Choose a few? Murong Yi and the others were confused. They didn't know what Murong Yu wanted to do. Could it be that Murong Yu only wanted Murong Yi to kill a few of them? For a moment, the Sacred Race and Demon Race experts on the Sacred Race couldn't help but feel uneasy, afraid that Murong Yi would choose them. Don't think too much. It's satisfying to kill your enemies with your own hands, but there's another way that's even more satisfying. What is it? Murong Yi couldn't help but ask. The others also looked at Murong Yu. Control their souls and make them your slaves, then drive them to do anything. Isn't this even better than killing them? Murong Yu smiled as he swept a glance at the experts on the Saint rankings. Hearing this, everyone finally understood. They finally understood why Murong Yu wanted Murong Yi to choose them. He wanted Murong Yi to control their souls and make them his slaves. For a moment, the Sacred Race and Demon Race experts on the Sacred Race and Demon Race experts were filled with rage. But that was all they could do. They couldn't do anything to Murongyu. Murongyu was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly. That's really good. If I control them and make them slaughter their entire families, I wonder if that's good enough. The sacred race and demon race experts' expressions changed again. While laughing, he had already started to choose the sacred race experts. In the end, he chose 10 sacred race experts. But after he made his choice, Murongyu knocked him hard on the head. Because with his strength, he couldn't control so many sacred race experts. 5 sacred race experts. Murongyu chose 5 sacred race experts, and then directly handed the soul pearls of the 5 sacred race experts to Murongyi. At this point, Murongyi now had 5 more slaves who were ranked on the saint rankings. On the other hand, Murongxian, Li Ling, and the others were looking at Murongyi with envy. However, on the Sacred Clan and Devil Clan side, especially the several hundred saint ranking experts that Murongyu had captured, they were glaring at Murongyu with venomous gazes. Each and every one of them gnashed their teeth, wishing they could slap Murongyu to death. Don't be envious. Everyone has a share. Now, each of you can choose. Remember, don't bite off more than you can chew. Murongyu smiled. He definitely wouldn't favor one over the other. After all, there were hundreds of sacred race experts. Even if the Human Race Alliance chose 1 sacred race expert, there would still be more. Hearing this, Murongxian and the others were overjoyed and made their choices. However, they could only control 1 or 2, at most 2 or 3. There weren't many more than 3. Murongxian, Li Ling, and Gukai were the only ones who were able to control 5 cultivators on the saint ranking as slaves, just like Murongxian. Murongxian inherited Murongyu's genes, so his soul was naturally very strong. Li Ling had the sacred war body, so he was very strong and had a good soul. As for Gukai, he usually had a silly smile, but he had a pure heart. His cultivation speed was even faster than Murongxian, Murongyi, and the others. It was very terrifying. In addition to the 4 of them, Murongyu's 2 daughters, Murongyin and Muronglin, also controlled 4 sacred race experts. They had also inherited Murongyu's excellent genes, so they were naturally not bad. Moreover, over the years, with the accumulation of various treasures from Murongyu, they all rushed into the sacred race and became sacred race experts. In the end, when all the experts on the saint rankings of the Human Race Alliance had taken control of the saint rankings, Murongyu still had over 100 experts on the saint rankings. This was because Murongyu and the other experts on the saint rankings were simply too numerous. On the other hand, the Human Race Alliance had fewer saint rankings experts. That was why it was like this. However, from now on, the Human Race Alliance had hundreds of sacred race experts out of nowhere, and their strength had skyrocketed. He sealed the remaining 100 or so experts on the saint rankings and threw the He Tu and the Book of the Luo away. These people could also be slaves to Zhao Jiqing and the other sacred race experts who were in charge of the Human Race Alliance's headquarters on Tiangang Mountain. Everyone, there's no need to be envious. As long as all of you enter the saint ranking, I'll naturally reward you with saint ranking experts as slaves. Murongyu smiled as he looked at the envious faces in the crowd. All hail the sacred lord. The Human Race Alliance's army immediately erupted into earth-shattering cheers. Chapter 1745. You have 3 days to leave the human territory. Otherwise, you'll be killed without mercy. Murongyu gestured with his hands. After the saints from the Human Alliance stopped cheering, he looked at the sacred race and monster race armies. His voice was calm, but it was filled with supreme authority. None of the sacred race or monster race soldiers doubted Murongyu's words. With Murongyu's current strength, they'll definitely die if he slaughters them. Thus, the crowd dispersed in a hubbub and shot madly toward their encampment. At this moment, Murongxian and the others walked over. Murongyi asked in confusion, "Father, the sacred race and monster race killed so many of our saints. Are we just going to let them go? According to their plan, they should start hunting them down. It would be best if they could wipe out the entire army." A cold light flashed through Murongyu's eyes. How could he let go of this blood debt so easily? Even if he agreed, the human race wouldn't. However, Moronyu had his own plan. Letting these people go will let them spread the news of my strength. Moreover, if they don't retreat in 3 days, it won't be too late for us to make a move. Moronyu looked into the distance, his eyes filled with endless killing intent. He knew that the sacred race and sacred race armies wouldn't retreat in 3 days. On the contrary, it was more likely that they would come back for revenge. This will not only show our benevolence, but also highlight the ignorance of their commander. When we really slaughter them, the blame will fall on the commanders of the sacred race and monster race, not us. Morong Xian said with a smile. Everyone was stunned for a moment before they reacted. Then, they escorted Morong Yu into the encampment in the Sky Fall Mountain Range. At this moment, with Li Ling and the others' help, news of Morong Yu's return and his forceful suppression of hundreds of sacred race and monster race experts on the Saint rankings had spread throughout the entire Saints world. The human race was naturally overjoyed. They all clapped their hands, feeling that they had hope. When the news reached the sacred race and monster race, the morale of the sacred race and monster race plummeted. After all, Morong Yu suppressed hundreds of experts on the Saint rankings in one move. Such strength was too terrifying. Apart from supreme experts, who else could be Morong Yu's match? Especially after the people present embellished the news spread that Morong Yu was growing stronger. If the two armies fought at this time, even if the sacred race and monster race armies outnumber the human race by several times, they still wouldn't be a match for the human race, because they had no morale at all. However, there were also some people who were terrified by Morong Yu's return. They were powerhouses from the 6 sacred lands. When they heard the sacred race and monster race's sacred race, sacred race. If Morong Yu defeated the Sacred Clan and Fiend Clan armies, he would definitely make a move against them. Given Morong Yu's methods, their orthodoxies might very well be destroyed this time. True, sacred, the current palace master, Feng Yongji, sat on the main seat. The 9 Cauldron sect, Big Dipper sect, and the other leaders of the 5 sacred lands sat on both sides of the main hall. Their faces were gloomy, and the atmosphere was heavy. Although they had sealed the sacred lands, they naturally had ways to enter and leave. The reason they were gathered here today was because of Morong Yu. Everyone, what do you think? Although Morong Yu's ranking on the Saint rankings isn't high, he's so powerful. Do you think he can defeat the Sacred Race and Monster Race's alliance? Big Dipper sect master, Shui Juanhao, glanced at the other 5 and asked in a deep voice. Although Morong Yu is powerful, the human race's alliance doesn't have the support of our sacred lands. How can they resist the Sacred Race and Monster Race's alliance? Morong Yu's return will only delay the human race's destruction. 9 Cauldron sect master, Bao Boming, said with a cold smile. Bao Boming is right. How can Morong Yu turn the tide alone? Once he angers the Sacred Race and Monster Race's Saint rankings, Morong Yu will definitely die when they come down from the Chaos Layer. I think we should just keep our sect's doors closed. What does the human race's survival have to do with us? Yuan Wei Yi, the sect master of Rising Sky sect, said with a sneer. Everyone fell silent. From a moment they closed their sect's doors, they no longer cared about the human race's survival. They were different from Morong Yu. Morong Yu cared about the people in the world. Since they were all from the human race, Morong Yu felt he had an obligation to protect the human race's heritage and prevent the human race from being destroyed. However, these high and mighty Saint Land's leaders did not think so. The human race's reproduction ability was too powerful. Moreover, there were many of them. Although the great Saint Lands were powerful, it was impossible for them to resist the sacred race and the human race's invasion. In fact, they might even lose their Saint Lands in the end. Therefore, they closed their sect's doors. As long as their Saint Lands did not perish, the human race's heritage and orthodoxy would still exist. After a long time, the human race would once again reproduce and become as large as it was now. Therefore, they chose to protect their Saint Lands and some of their subsidiary forces. As for the rest, what did it have to do with them? In fact, they felt they had done everything they could to protect their Saint Land's subsidiary forces. This was the face of the 6 great Saint Lands. Once the human race's alliance is destroyed, the sacred race and monster race's armies will definitely not let our 6 great Saint Lands off. Once Moron-U wins, our 6 great Saint Lands will definitely not have a good ending. What we hope the most is that the 2 sides can fight to a stalemate. Bailuo Palace's palace master sneered with an indifferent expression. The other 5 nodded in agreement. They all felt that Bailuo was right. However, it's impossible for them to fight to a stalemate. I think it's only a matter of time before the human race's alliance is destroyed. We must open up the primeval world before they decide a victor. This way, we can ensure that our 6 great Saint Lands will not be harassed by the sacred race and monster race. Feng Yongji, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Hearing this, Bai Luo and the others' eyes glinted. The primeval world is a small, independent world that has existed since the primeval age. It contains an extremely rich variety of heavenly treasures. However, the ferocious beasts inside are extremely terrifying. The 6 great Saint Lands will not be able to conquer the small world in a short time, even if they join forces. It was because they discovered the primeval world that the 6 great Saint Lands dared to seal their sex and resist the human race's alliance. Moreover, according to what they knew, the primeval world was extremely large. The heaven-earth Yuan Qi inside was of a higher grade than the sacred worlds. The 6 great Saint Lands would only benefit them if they moved in. In fact, they might even be able to use the treasures in the primeval world to break through to the supreme stage. Heavenly Descent Mountain Range. Moron-U only had time to rest after dealing with some matters. During this rest, he began to deal with some of the news from before. Because he was in seclusion, he had shut off all communications. Therefore, he didn't even receive the message sent by his clone. At this time, he received a warning from his clone. Moron-U also learned that only the dragon race, the angel race, the fiend race, and a few other races did not participate in the alliance between the saint race and the demon race. Moron-U was not surprised that the angel race and the fiend race did not participate. However, Moron-U was surprised that even the dragon race did not participate. However, this was also what Moron-U hoped for. It was good that the dragon race did not participate. Otherwise, he would inevitably have to face the dragon race in the future. Moron-U had decided to let his clone control the dragon race. As for the other races, Moron-U had never heard of them before. However, he still remembered their races. When he unified the sacred world in the future, he would not touch them. What surprised Moron-U was that he learned about something called the primeval world from the slaves of the 5 great Saint Lands. True Martial Temple did not have Moron-U slaves. The 6 great Saint Lands were currently developing and attempting to conquer the primeval world. Once they conquered the primeval world, they would move in. Moreover, the primeval world had a large number of heavenly treasures. However, Moron-U's slaves did not know where the primeval world was, nor did they know how to get in and out. Primeval world? No wonder the 6 great Saint Lands are so perverse. I will let you continue developing the primeval world. When the time comes, I will let you know what it means to work for others. Moron-U sneered. As far as he knew, his slaves on the saint rankings were fighting in the primeval world. Although they did not know how to get in and out, Moron-U could feel their existence. Being able to feel their existence meant that Moron-U could directly teleport over. When the 6 great Saint Lands conquered the primeval world, Moron-U would teleport over and forcefully suppress Feng Yongji and the others. A day passed in the blink of an eye. During this day, the monster race and the saint race allied forces did not make any moves. Just as Moron-U guessed, they did not retreat. Even on the second day, the human race alliance discovered that the saint race and monster race armies blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they charged over from afar. Then, tens of billions of saint experts lined up in the plains in front of the Sky Fall mountain range. Their morale was like a rainbow. It was no longer like before when their morale had plummeted. At this time, the Saint race and monster race allied forces could be said to be murderous. Their morale was high, and their combat power soared. The Great Alliance of a Human Race found this rather strange. The only explanation was that there were experts on the Allied forces' side who came over to take charge. In fact, this was the case. Two figures slowly walked over from the back of the crowd under the escort of hundreds of people. Wherever they passed, the Allied forces automatically opened up a vacuum path for them. The two people in the lead were ruthless experts who emitted a terrifying aura. One of them was Murong Yu's old acquaintance, Feng Sanqiong. However, the current Feng Sanqiong's strength seemed to have improved again. The other person also gave Murong Yu a familiar feeling. That person even emitted an aura that made Murong Yu feel a sense of danger. Chapter 1746. That person seemed to be Feng Qianquan. After he was killed by Murong Yu, he disappeared. Murong Yu thought that this guy was completely dead, but he didn't expect that this guy still had a chance to be reborn. However, the aura on his body at this time was even more terrifying than Feng Sanqiong's. Originally, Feng Sanqiong was the ancestor of the Feng clan. Feng Qianquan didn't dare to breathe in front of him, but today they seem to have swapped places. Feng Sanqiong followed Feng Qianquan with a flattering smile on his face. He didn't dare to breathe. Murong Yu frowned slightly. He always felt that the aura coming from Feng Qianquan was a bit strange. It was like Feng Qianquan's original aura, but it also didn't seem to be. Murong Yu had encountered that aura before, and that aura made Murong Yu feel a strong sense of danger. In other words, Feng Qianquan had the strength to threaten Murong Yu's life at this time. Murong Yu's heart became solemn. He led the saint-ranking powerhouses of the Human Clan Alliance to greet him. In the end, both sides stopped in the void with a large distance between them. Murong Yu, you're finally back. Very good. Next year, today will be the death anniversary of you and the Human Clan Alliance. Feng Sanqiong took a step forward and looked at Murong Yu with resentment. A cold voice came from his mouth and shrouded the world. Murong Yu shook his head helplessly and also took a step forward. With just you? Feng Sanqiong, it's not that I look down on you, but you really can't do it. Even if you're 10 times stronger, you can't kill me. Feng Sanqiong's face immediately turned blood red. His eyes flashed with incomparable resentment. His hatred for Murong Yu grew stronger. However, Feng Sanqiong also knew that Murong Yu's strength had improved again. Now, even if he had the Phoenix Plume Nether Spear, he probably couldn't kill Murong Yu. However, today's protagonist wasn't him, but Feng Qianquan beside him. As long as Feng Qianquan was around, Murong Yu would definitely die. Thus, Feng Sanqiong snorted coldly. Murong Yu, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Today, you will die without a doubt. Murong Yu sneered. His gaze swept past Feng Sanqiong and finally stopped at Feng Qianquan beside him. At the same time, his heart grew heavier and heavier. Among the humans, he was the only one who had reached the top 10 on the Saint rankings. If Feng Qianquan challenged him and entangled him, Feng Sanqiong would definitely go on a killing spree and bring the experts of the Sacred Clan and the Demon Clan to kill him. At that time, the Human Alliance would definitely not be able to stop them. After all, Feng Sanqiong's strength was much stronger than Li Ling and the others. Murong, Xian, and the others weren't Feng Sanqiong's opponent at all. Murong Yu, long time no see. At that moment, Feng Qianquan took a step forward and looked at Murong Yu with a cold expression. Murong Yu was stunned when he heard Feng Qianquan's voice, because this voice didn't belong to Feng Qianquan at all. However, Murong Yu felt that this voice was quite familiar. What? You don't recognize me? Weren't you the one who was chased by me until you ran for your life? Feng Qianquan sneered. Suddenly, Murong Yu's expression changed drastically. It's you. At the same time that he blurted out, Murong Yu's heart couldn't help but thump. At the same time, he had already transmitted a message to Murong, Xian, and the others behind him. Later, I'll block this person and Feng Qianquan. You guys try your best to escape from the Sky Fall mountain range. Run as far as you can. Murong, Xian, and the others' expressions changed drastically. If even Moronyu was like this, then who exactly was Feng Qianquan? Could he be Ji Zun? That's right, this person is Ji Zun. However, this person isn't Ji Zun's original body. It should be a wisp of his soul or divine sense that is attached to Feng Qianquan. Even so, this person's strength is definitely not inferior to the first on the saint rankings, Ruthless. He might even surpass him. It's very likely that I'm no match for him. Without waiting for them to ask, Moronyu seemed to know their doubts and gave them the answer directly. Ji Zun, Murong, Xian, Li Ling, and the others were in a mess. This was Ji Zun. Wasn't it said that this was the era where Ji Zun was not born? Why did this Ji Zun appear? No wonder the sacred tribe was so bold. It turned out that they had Ji Zun backing them up. With Ji Zun, how could the human race be their match? For a moment, Murong, Xian, and the others were furious and indignant. The difference between the two sides was too great. How could they resist? How dare you interfere in the battle between ordinary saints? After the initial shock, Moronyu looked at Feng Qianquan coldly. His voice was low and murderous. This person was Murongyu's old acquaintance. He was one of the 3 Ji Zun of the primordial battlefield. When he was chasing Murongyu back then, he almost killed Murongyu. In the end, Murongyu escaped back to the sacred world to escape the other party's pursuit. But he didn't expect this guy to appear again today. From the looks of it, he was determined to kill Murongyu. Without waiting for the other party to answer, Murongyu looked at Feng Sangqiong with a sneer. Feng Sangqiong, weren't you killed by them once? Why are you cooperating with them now? Associating with wolves? Even if I'm killed, you won't be far from death. Feng Sangqiong sneered again and again. You don't need to care about my life and death. You should care more about your own life and death now. Before his voice fell, Feng Sangqiong looked at Feng Qianquan. Sir, I want to fight and kill Murongyu with my own hands. Feng Qianquan nodded. So Feng Sangqiong stepped out and slowly closed in on Murongyu. Remember my words, don't look back and run. Murongyu transmitted his voice to Murong Li Xuan and the others again, and he had already gone forward. Feng Sangqiong, how many more chances do you have to use Phoenix Nirvana? If I kill you this time, can you still be resurrected? While talking, Murongyu had already taken out the Xian Yuan sword and grabbed it in his hand. Boom! An aura more powerful than before erupted from his body and soared into the sky. The aura comparable to the second strongest on the sacred ranking covered the sky and swept towards Feng Sangqiong like a torrent, wanting to suppress him. Feng Sangqiong laughed loudly. Murongyu, do you think you still have a chance to kill me? While speaking, Feng Sangqiong's aura also erupted. Under the support of Phoenix Plume Nether Spear, his strength soared and reached the level comparable to the third on the sacred ranking, Dongmen Li Xuan. But the gap between him and Murongyu was still very big. If he still had this bit of strength, it was naturally impossible for him to be Murongyu's opponent. There was even a chance that he would be killed by Murongyu again. However, Feng Sangqiong dared to challenge Murongyu. It was impossible for him to only have this bit of means. Soul-suppressing stone, suppress all souls. At the same time, when the terrifying aura erupted, Feng Sangqiong roared. He raised his hand, and a brick-like object was taken out by him. This unknown object was like a brick. It was like a cuboid. But after it was taken out by Feng Sangqiong, it expanded with the wind and instantly grew to the size of a small mountain. It suspended above Murongyu's head and emitted a halo. An inexplicable force was released and quickly dissipated in all directions with the soul-suppressing stone as the center. At this moment, the few sacred ranking experts behind Murongyu suddenly felt that their souls seemed to be torn apart by someone. The sudden sharp pain made some of them couldn't help but scream. Apart from that, even more experts from the Human Race Alliance, the Sacred Race, and the Demon Race cried out in pain behind Murongyu. Without exception, their souls seemed to have been torn apart. Swish! So everyone retreated without hesitation and went far away from here. They found that the further away they were from the soul-suppressing stone, the weaker the pain in their souls. However, they still found that their souls seemed to be imprisoned and suppressed in the soul space and couldn't move. They were already like this, let alone Murong Yu, who bore the brunt of it. However, Murong Yu was a soul saint, and his soul was extremely terrifying. Although most of the power of the soul-suppressing stone was suppressed towards him, Murong Yu's soul was not suppressed. However, even so, his soul was still tragically suppressed, making it difficult for him to move. This had a huge impact on his ability to unleash his strength. Be careful, Sacred Lord. This soul-suppressing stone has the ability to suppress and kill souls. Once your soul is suppressed, Feng Sangxiong can easily erase your soul. When Murong Yu looked at the soul-suppressing stone, Hichu's voice sounded in his mind. Murong Yu was taken aback. With a single thought, his soul began to riot. An incomparably terrifying soul force erupted from his body to resist the soul-suppressing stone. And he found that Murong Yu could actually resist the power of the soul-suppressing stone and was not suppressed. This made Feng Sangxiong very surprised. Kill. However, Feng Sangxiong was only surprised for a moment. The next moment, he held the phoenix plume netherworld spear and attacked Murong Yu. As long as Murong Yu had a clone, he wouldn't be able to resist the soul-suppressing stone. At that time, his soul would be suppressed. At that time, wouldn't he be at Feng Sangxiong's mercy? Sacred Lord, Feng Sangxiong shouldn't have completely controlled the soul-suppressing stone. You'd better seize this soul-suppressing stone. Once you integrate with the soul-suppressing stone, your soul power will skyrocket and have the ability to suppress souls. At that time, your soul will have the dual ability of devouring and suppressing souls. It's extremely terrifying. At this time, Hichu's voice sounded in Murong Yu's mind again. Murong Yu's heart moved. He glanced at the soul-suppressing stone and began to plan in his heart. To be honest, Murong Yu didn't have a trace of certainty to deal with Feng Qingquan, who was possessed by Jizun. However, if he could snatch the soul-suppressing stone and fuse with it, Murong Yu's soul strength would skyrocket. At that time, he might be able to eliminate the soul of Jizun that was attached to Feng Qingquan. And Murong Yu only had one chance to seize the soul-suppressing stone. One chance to kill Feng Sangxiong in one blow. Otherwise, if Feng Sangxiong or Jizun reacted, Murong Yu wouldn't have chance. Chapter 1747. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Murong Yu and Feng Sangxiong had already bombarded the ruins. After the earth-shaking loud noise, Feng Sangxiong and Murong Yu were both sent flying by the terrifying shockwave. However, Murong Yu was only sent flying a few dozen miles away, while Feng Sangxiong was sent flying 1,000 miles away. The winner was obvious. This was still because Murong Yu didn't use his full strength and didn't use the source of the holy world. Otherwise, Feng Sangxiong's defeat would be even more unsightly. However, Murong Yu still didn't have the confidence to kill Feng Sangxiong in one blow. Otherwise, he would definitely not show mercy. Humph! Feng Sangxiong's face was red, and he snorted with anger. He stepped on a large piece of void under his feet and attacked again with the long spear in his hand. During this process, he even controlled the soul-suppressing stone to burst out an even more terrifying pressure, which violently suppressed Murong Yu. Murong Yu's face instantly turned pale, although he recovered quickly. But all this had been seen clearly by Feng Sangxiong. Therefore, Feng Sangxiong rushed over with more confidence. Boom! 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 Without the slightest fear, Murong Yu charged forward and started fighting with Feng Sangxiong. At the beginning, Murong Yu still had the upper hand. However, as time went by, Murong Yu gradually lost to Feng Sangxiong. In the eyes of outsiders, it was because of the soul-suppressing stone that Murong Yu lost to Feng Sangxiong. Feng Sangxiong and even the supreme martial artist who possessed Feng Qingquan also thought so. However, although Murong Yu was no match for Feng Sangxiong, he wasn't defeated. He was still fighting with Feng Sangxiong crazily. Occasionally, he could still repel Feng Sangxiong with a great saint art. During this process, Morongyu had been observing Feng Sangxiong, especially Feng Qianquan's reaction. He found that at the beginning, Feng Qianquan was still constantly watching him. However, as he fell into a disadvantageous position without any openings, his attention gradually disappeared from his body, leaving only a trace of it to monitor Morongyu. As for Feng Sangxiong, Morongyu, on the other hand, had never placed him in his eyes. At the same time, behind Morongyu, Morongxian, Li Ling, and Shengzhen's army slowly retreated. At this moment, they had already retreated far away from the battlefield and entered the Skyfall mountain range. The fierce battle continued. The more Feng Sangxiong fought, the more excited he got, because he felt that Morongyu was about to be killed by him. However, what made him a little depressed was that he was about to kill Morongyu. However, Morongyu accidentally dodged his attack. This is the time. Morongyu had been observing Feng Qianquan. At that moment, Feng Qianquan's attention completely disappeared from him. At this moment, Morongyu roared in his heart and burst out with his strongest attack. Immediately, Morongyu used the origin power of the holy world and shrouded the surrounding area, forming his own domain. In the domain, Morongyu was the master. Therefore, the moment the domain was formed, Feng Sangxiong's heart was shrouded by an extremely strong aura of death. Under the shock, Feng Sangxiong didn't even have time to react and retreated immediately. This was the reaction of strong. However, everything was already too late. The moment the domain was formed, Feng Sangxiong's ending was already destined, death. Just when Feng Sangxiong was about to escape, Morongyu had already appeared in front of him. At the same time, Morongyu's big hand had already crushed Sangxiong and grabbed Feng Sangxiong's body. Die! Morongyu roared. A terrifying power gushed out from his palm. With a bang, Feng Sangxiong's physical body and even soul were directly shattered by Morongyu. He was shattered into pieces. Morongyu knew that Feng Sangxiong was dead for sure. However, Morongyu didn't have time to check whether he still had a chance to resurrect. At the first moment, he stretched out another big hand and was about to grab the soul-suppressing stone that was flying away. Chi! After Feng Sangxiong was killed last time, the phoenix plume nether spear pierced the sky and was about to escape into the distance. Last time, Morongyu didn't have a domain yet, so the phoenix plume nether spear escaped. This time, it wouldn't happen. With a thought, this phoenix clan's strongest supreme weapon was directly imprisoned in the void. Then, it was caught by Morongyu. After sealing it, he threw it into the Hichu Luo Shu. Roar! All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The speed was extremely fast. However, the person who possessed Feng Qianquan was indeed a supreme powerhouse. He was the first to react. He first let out an angry roar. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura burst out from his body. Then, with his body as the center, it swept in all directions like a tide. Wherever it passed, large pieces of the void were shattered. Even Morongyu's domain couldn't withstand it. Large pieces of the void were shattered. What terrifying strength! Morongyu was shocked. He had already swallowed the soul-suppressing stone. He actually threw it into the chaos furnace and began to refine it. At the same time, he mobilized the absolute power in the domain and transformed it into a huge saber that contained terrifying power. He slashed at Feng Qianquan. Feng Qianquan was infuriated. He growled again and reached out with his hand, grabbing onto Morongyu's battle blade. With a loud bang, the terrifying huge saber was crushed by Feng Qianquan. However, Feng Qianquan's huge hand was also shattered. At that moment, Feng Qianquan had already shattered the sky and was closing in on Morongyu. He wanted to kill Morongyu. Morongyu seized the time to refine the soul-suppressing stone. Then, he condensed the origin energy of the holy world again and charged at Feng Qianquan. At the same time, his space rule, time rule, heavenly king great saint technique, and other great saint techniques burst out and bombarded Feng Qianquan. However, what shocked Morongyu was that although this guy was only a soul, The power that erupted from it was incomparably terrifying. Murong Yu's attacks were all shattered without exception. However, Feng Qingquan didn't have time to attack more. He attacked Murong Yu. However, in this short period of time, he had already closed in on Murong Yu. If he continued to approach Murong Yu would definitely die. Murong Yu, your strength is still low. You can't unleash the full power of the origin energy. At this stage, you're no match for that guy. Unless he advances another level where you refine more origin energy, you'd better retreat quickly. Murong Yu is still resisting Feng Qingquan. However, the Holy World's origin energy's slightly aged voice rang in Murong Yu's ears. As for Hichu and the others, they had long advised Murong Yu to retreat. However, Murong Yu ignored them. Guard the Skyfall mountain range for me. I'll lure Feng Qingquan away. Remember, even if my soul jade slip is shattered, don't believe that I'm dead. Murong Yu transmitted his voice to Li Ling and the others. Then, he turned around and shattered the void, flying into the distance. Where do you think you're going? Seeing that Murong Yu had actually escaped, Feng Qingquan was furious. This was the second time. If he let Murong Yu escape again, how could he still have the face to continue living in the holy world? Therefore, he transformed into a stream of light and chased after Murong Yu. In an instant, the two of them disappeared on the spot. If it weren't for the fact that everyone clearly saw the battle between the two of them and the shattered heaven and earth due to their battle, they would even think that it was an illusion. What do we do now? After Murong Yu and Feng Qingquan left, the Human Alliance, Holy Race, and Demon Race armies didn't know what to do. Feng Sangqiong was killed. Their strongest expert had also gone to pursue Murong Yu. Now that the Alliance had no leader, what should they do? Should they continue to attack the Human Alliance or retreat? On the other side, the Human Alliance also hesitated. Should they take the opportunity to send troops to defeat the Holy Race and Demon Race armies, or listen to Murong Yu's order to guard the sky, Fall Mountain Range? If they sent troops, although the two strongest experts of the Alliance were no longer around, they couldn't guarantee that they would win. After all, the Alliance still had many experts on the Saint ranking. Once the battle started, the outcome would still be a problem. For a moment, both sides hesitated and didn't dare to act rashly. However, in the end, the Holy Race and Demon Race armies made the decision to retreat first. The Human Alliance didn't send troops to chase after them. Just like that, the extremely tense battle vanished like smoke in thin air. Now, only Murong Yu and Feng Qingquan were left. Once a victor was decided, it would be time for the Human Alliance and the Holy Race and Demon Race armies to decide the victor. Therefore, both sides immediately send out scouts to investigate the situation of Murong Yu and Feng Qingquan. At this moment, where are the two of them? Murong Yu used his fastest speed, constantly shuttling through the endless space-time of the holy world. As for Feng Qingquan, he followed closely behind, relentlessly chasing after him. However, what made Feng Qingquan furious was that although his speed was fast, it was about the same as Murong Yu's speed. He couldn't close the distance between him and Murong Yu at all. This also made Murong Yu a little worried. Even a wisp of an honorable soul was so powerful. What more their original body? However, this was also the reason why Murong Yu didn't use all his strength to escape. At this moment, he was refining the soul-suppressing stone. After being refined by the chaos furnace, Murong Yu had already eliminated Feng Sangqiong's remaining divine sense inside. At this moment, the soul-suppressing stone had been thrown into the endless soul sea by Murong Yu. He used his enormous soul power to start fusing with the soul-suppressing stone. However, he didn't know what level of treasure the soul-suppressing stone was. For a moment, Murong Yu couldn't fuse with it and refine it. Murong Yu knew that fusing and refining the soul-suppressing stone would be a long-term process. However, he didn't dare to let Feng Qingquan leave. Otherwise, what if Feng Qingquan went back and destroyed the Human Alliance and the Holy Race in anger? Therefore, Murong Yu didn't dare to get rid of Feng Qingquan. Chapter 1748. Feng Qianquan was also infuriated as he chased after Murong Yu relentlessly. In fact, as a supreme being, Feng Qianquan's target wasn't the Human Race Alliance. After all, he was a supreme being level expert. With his strength, unifying the holy world or annihilating any of the races in the holy world was just a piece of cake, even though his strength wasn't ranked high among the supreme beings. However, in the era where the supreme beings didn't appear, even the saint-ranking experts could dominate, let alone a supreme being like him. Therefore, he only had one target, and that was Murong Yu. Back then, Murong Yu's actions in the immemorial battlefield had already angered him. Later on, he chased after Murong Yu, but he couldn't kill Murong Yu. Because of this, he was teased by his two brothers who were also supreme beings every day, which made him very angry. Of course, he wasn't angry with his two brothers. If it were him, he would also laugh at the other person. The person he hated was Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu came and went like a shadow, and his original body couldn't directly appear in the holy world. If he only appeared with his soul or spirit, he wouldn't be able to last long. Therefore, he found Feng Sanxiong, who had also entered the immemorial battlefield and was killed by them once. He wanted to control Feng Sanxiong's physical body. As an ambitious person, Feng Sanxiong naturally didn't agree with his idea. Who knew if he could regain his freedom after being controlled? However, Feng Sanxiong wasn't willing to lose this super expert, because he also wanted to kill Murong Yu, but he didn't succeed once. He wanted to borrow this person's strength to kill Murong Yu and even unify the holy world. Therefore, he suggested this supreme being's soul to control Feng Qianquan's physical body. There was no need for possession at all. When Feng Qianquan knew about it, he agreed without hesitation, because he also wanted to kill Murong Yu, and he was killed by Murong Yu back then. However, Murong Yu was getting stronger and stronger. It was becoming more and more impossible for him to kill Murong Yu. Thus, after knowing that this supreme martial artist could kill Murong Yu, he agreed. As long as he killed Murong Yu, even though it wasn't his soul that had taken the initiative, it was still his body that had taken action. It could be considered as him taking action. Murong Yu, this time, I'll kill you no matter where you go. You won't be able to escape. Feng Qianquan's furious voice shattered billions of space-time and transmitted over. Murong Yu didn't respond at all. He just kept flying forward. At that moment, he did not have the time to bother with Feng Qianquan. In fact, Murong Yu was only using 1/10 of his mind to control his body to fly forward. The remaining 90% of his soul was fully focused on refining and fusing with the soul-suppressing stone. Murong Yu was originally in the Heavenfall mountain range, in human territory. However, his speed was extremely fast. It didn't take long for him to rush out of the human territory and enter the demon territory. The number of demon saints was actually greater than the number of human saints. Therefore, their territory was much larger than the human territory. This was the first time Murong Yu had entered the demon territory after ascending to the holy world. Because of the differences between the demon clan and the human clan, the demon territory had a different style. However, Murong Yu didn't have the time to stop. Instead, he continued to fly forward without stopping. As for Feng Qianquan, he was constantly chasing after Murong Yu. However, he couldn't close the distance between him and Murong Yu. Moreover, as time passed, Feng Qianquan became more and more irritable. The frequency of his attacks also increased. Originally, he was only attacking Murong Yu. However, in the end, the range of his attacks became larger and larger. Wherever he passed, the sky shattered and mountains were flattened. Some unlucky Demon Clan powerhouses didn't even have time to react before they were implicated and died an unnatural death. Although the Demon Clan had joined forces with the Holy Clan to invade the Human Clan, in principle, these ordinary Demon Clan members were Murong Yu's enemies. However, these Demon Clan members were only ordinary saints after all. The culprits were only the higher-ups. Murong Yu didn't want many innocent Demon Clan members to die because of him. Therefore, in the end, he chose to fly in the uninhabited areas. However, even so, there were still innocent demon clan members who died in Feng Qingquan's hands. These were completely unavoidable. Muronyu was helpless, unless he refined and merged with the soul-suppressing stone. After the demon clan, Muronyu rushed into the Holy Clan's territory. The Holy Clan claimed to have 10,000 races. However, in reality, there were more than 10,000 races. Therefore, the Holy Clan's territory was also the largest. They occupied 90% of the Holy World's territory. The combined territory of the Human Clan and the Demon Clan was only 1/10 of it. Even so, the Holy Clan still wanted to chase the Human Clan and the Demon Clan out of the Holy World. The escape continued. The two of them were still chasing each other. However, the Holy World was only so big. Apart from those areas that were too far away and unknown, Muronyu had passed through many places. However, in order to prevent the Human Clan from being harmed, Muronyu only ran back and forth between the Holy Clan and the Demon Clan. He ran in circles with Feng Qingquan. This made Feng Qingquan even more furious and irritable. In the end, he even deliberately vented his anger wherever he went. As a result, the number of casualties skyrocketed. In this regard, Muronyu felt that his decision was wise. After all, the casualties were all from the Demon Clan and the Holy Clan. None of them were from the Human Clan. On the other side, because Muronyu and Feng Qingquan had left, the Human Clan Alliance and the Holy Clan and Demon Clan Alliance were in a confrontation again. Neither side acted rashly. They were waiting for news from Muronyu and Feng Qingquan. This was because even if they decided the winner now, it would be useless. Once Feng Qingquan and Muronyu decided the winner, they would be easily destroyed. It would be a waste of time for them to fight now. The 6 Holy Lands were still working hard to develop the ancient world, and their progress was extremely gratifying. A large number of heavenly treasures were collected by them, strengthening the treasure vaults of the 6 Holy Lands. The Chaos Layer was still calm. Many people were concerned about the movements of the Holy World. However, no one dared to make a move. This was because that was a rule jointly made by the most powerful forces in the Chaos Layer. If anyone dared to violate it, they would be jointly attacked by the few major forces. In the Holy World, apart from the sovereigns and rulers, who could resist those major forces? No one. Time continued to pass. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. On this day, Muronyu, who was being chased by Feng Qingquan, suddenly stopped. Then, he threw his head back and laughed wildly. Seeing Muronyu suddenly acting like a fool, Feng Qingquan was stunned. However, he quickly reacted. Without saying anything, he shattered the void and unleashed his strongest attack and speed towards Muronyu. However, this time, Muronyu did not continue to run or dodge. Instead, he turned around and charged towards Feng Qingquan. Seeing this, Feng Qingquan was overjoyed. Feng Qingquan, you've been chasing me for a long time. I'll finish you off now. As he spoke, Muronyu also used his Great Saint technique and charged towards Feng Qingquan. At this moment, Feng Qingquan clearly felt an extremely terrifying pressure descending from the sky and directly suppressing his soul. At this moment, Feng Qingquan's soul felt as if it had fallen into a swamp. It was difficult for him to move. In fact, when the invisible pressure grew stronger, not only was Feng Qingquan's soul unable to move, but it was also suppressed. Feng Qingquan's soul was about to rush out. Soul suppression. Feng Qingquan's expression changed abruptly as he growled. At the same time, he suddenly turned around and retreated. Then, he unfolded his body and flew towards the distance. He actually ran away without a fight. He actually refined the soul suppression stone. Feng Qingquan was extremely shocked. He had a deep understanding of the soul suppression stone. This was because he was the one who gave Feng Sangxiong the soul suppression stone. The reason why Feng Sangxiong could control the soul suppression stone was because of his help as a prime. Moreover, it took him a lot of time to let Feng Sangxiong control a little bit of the stone and unleash a little bit of its power. Muronyu, on the other hand, had managed to fuse the energy with his own strength in half a year? The reason why he thought so was because he realized that the Soul Suppression Stone's power was more than 10 times stronger than when Feng Sanxiong controlled it. In fact, what Feng Qinquan did not know was that there were many reasons why Murong you could refine and integrate the Soul Suppression Stone so quickly. With the help of the Holy World's origin, Hichu's help, and the fact that he was a soul saint and he had integrated the Soul Devouring Pearl before, he could integrate the Soul Suppression Stone so quickly. Holy Soul Slash. Just as Feng Qinquan retreated, Murong Yu's speed was also raised to the limit. In an instant, he had already closed the distance between him and Feng Qinquan and appeared beside him. At the same time, he had already launched a soul attack. Feng Qinquan's soul was not his to begin with, so he was most afraid of soul attacks. In addition to Murong Yu's soul suppression, the prime soul that was controlling Feng Qinquan was almost materialized. Puff! After a muffled sound, the wisp of prime soul that was controlling Feng Qinquan was shattered by Murong Yu. At this moment, Feng Qinquan's soul that was being suppressed suddenly woke up and took control of his physical body. However, before he could react, Murong Yu's soul attack had already landed. As a result, Feng Qinquan's soul was once again obliterated by Murong Yu in an incomparably tragic manner. He couldn't be more dead. Murong Yu, I'll be back. You'll die in my hands in the end. An incomparably angry roar came from the horizon, containing an irreconcilable hatred. It was clearly the roar of the Prime's true body. In fact, this voice even covered most of the space in the Holy World, allowing countless people to hear it clearly. In response, Murong Yu only sneered. Right now, it was just interest. In the future, he would take it back with interest. Using the words of that honorable martial artist, Murong Yu would personally kill that honorable martial artist one day. Moreover, Murong Yu firmly believed that day was not far away. Chapter 1749. Feng Qinquan was killed. When the Supreme who possessed Feng Qinquan let out a furious roar, almost everyone in the Holy World heard it. In addition, the Supreme left behind some harsh words. Now, they had a rough idea of what had happened. Murong Yu had won and killed the strongest expert of the Demon Clan and Sacred Clan Alliance. Perhaps, to the humans, Feng Qinquan's identity wasn't very clear. Not many people knew that Feng Qinquan was possessed by a sovereign. However, the Sacred Clan and Demon Clan were different. Ever since Murong Yu suppressed and controlled hundreds of experts on the Saint ranking, Feng Sanxiong deliberately leaked the news of Feng Qinquan being possessed by a Supreme in order to stabilize the morale of the army. It was because of this that the Demon Clan and Sacred Clan Alliance didn't collapse or retreat. On the contrary, they rushed over with murderous intent, wanting to destroy the human race. This time, they were all terrified. Even the Supreme wasn't a match for Murong Yu. Who else in the Holy World could be his match? Although the Supreme was only a remnant soul and couldn't unleash the true might of Supreme, he was still a Supreme after all. He was even stronger than the #1 expert on the Saint ranking. Murong Yu was invincible. This thought spread among the Demon Clan and Sacred Clan Alliance for a moment. Then they were all horrified. They were afraid that Murong Yu would come back and kill them. Weren't they courting death by going against such a person? The morale of the army was slack. The Sacred Clan and Demon Clan Alliance were about to collapse. At this time, the Human Clan Alliance was also preparing to attack the Alliance. This was the best opportunity. The Human Clan Alliance might even unify the Holy World, and Murong Yu would become the ruler of the entire Holy World. Bang! At this moment, a black shadow shot down from the sky and landed in front of the allied army of the demon race and sacred race. At the same time, a cold voice came from afar. Feng Qinquan has been killed by me. The supreme soul that possessed his body has also been killed by me. Why aren't the Sacred Clan and Demon Clan Alliance surrendering? The voice was mighty and spread out in the Skyfall mountain range like a torrent. It then spread in all directions and covered 1/9 of the Holy World. Suddenly, All living beings in this 1/9 region were shocked. At this time, they knew that Feng Qinkuan of the Phoenix clan had been possessed by a supreme. What shocked them the most was that Murong Yu was actually capable of killing supreme beings. Although it was only a soul. Boom! The morale of the allied army, which was already on the verge of collapse, was completely crushed at this moment. In an instant, like monkeys scattering when the tree falls, the allied army quickly fled in all directions, no matter how the alliance's upper echelons of them tried. These people knew that if they didn't escape, they would be killed, they would forever kill. At the same time, hundreds of figures soared into the sky from the depths of the Skyfall mountain range. They smashed through space and turned into streaks of light that charged towards the Allied forces. Along the way, these people had already unleashed terrifying attacks, like a torrential downpour towards the fleeing soldiers. The first ones to fly out were all the experts on the Saint rankings of the Human Alliance in the Heavenfall mountain range. Their attacks were their strongest attacks. Apart from the experts on the Saint rankings, who else in the Alliance could withstand these attacks? It was like cutting grass. In just an instant, a large number of soldiers in the Alliance were torn to pieces by these terrifying attacks. And this was only the beginning of the Human Alliance's counterattack. Following these experts on the Saint rankings, the Human Race Alliance's army was also mobilized. Groups of disciplined and orderly soldiers quickly flew out of the Skyfall mountain range, bravely charging towards the defeated Allied army. Normally, their morale was high and they were conserving their energy. On one side, the morale was low and the soldiers were defeated like a landslide. The two sides were not on the same level at all. As a result, the Allied army soldiers were quickly slaughtered like they were cutting grass. In a short period of time, a large number of Allied soldiers were killed. As the Human Race Alliance launched their counterattack, temporary teleportation portals were quickly set up in the Skyfall mountain range. Following this, the experts of the Human Race Alliance were teleported into the Skyfall mountain range from all directions and joined the army that was hunting down the Allied army. This was all the strength of the human race. All of their strength joined the army that was hunting down the Allied army. There were more and more experts on the human race's side, and their equipment was getting better and better. On the other hand, there were fewer and fewer experts on the Allied army's side. In the beginning, the experts on the Saint rankings of the Allied army still stubbornly resisted. However, after Murong Yu killed dozens of them with a single slap, the experts on the Saint rankings were scared and fled faster than ordinary people. As a result, the Allied army was defeated even faster. Later on, there were fewer and fewer soldiers in the Allied army. Under such a vicious cycle, there weren't many people left in the Allied army in the end. The Sacred Race and Demon Race armies took about 1,000 years to conquer 90% of the human race's territory. However, it took the Human Race Alliance less than a month to reclaim these territories. In less than a month, they had already conquered all the territories. Moreover, apart from some experts on the Saint rankings, and especially powerful sages, almost all the sages of the Sacred Race and Demon Race that invaded the human race were killed. Of course, Murong Yu didn't kill these people. Otherwise, even the experts on the Saint rankings wouldn't have been able to escape. However, Murong Yu didn't stop the human race soldiers from slaughtering the Allied army soldiers. He knew that this couldn't be stopped. After all, how many sages had the Sacred Race and Demon Race killed when they invaded the human race? How much of their wealth had they seized? Murong Yu had to be hunted down and even killed. Otherwise, the human race would resent him as the alliance leader. Once the people resented him, Murong Yu would lose all of his prestige. Unifying the sacred world? That was just a dream. However, without stopping them, Murong Yu's prestige grew with each passing day. In the end, he became a true Lord rank existence of the entire human race. Right now, Murong Yu's prestige was far inferior to that of Supreme, True Martial, and Supreme Peerless. After all, it was Murong Yu who had turned the tide. It was Murong Yu who had saved the entire human race. However, Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Peerless didn't even appear when the human race was about to be destroyed. Supreme Peerless wasn't so bad because she didn't appear. However, at least the Unparalleled Palace had helped and suffered heavy losses because of this. However, not only did the True Marshal Sacred Hall not send out their troops, they even closed their doors. This was an action that the vast majority of the human race despised. Supreme True Marshal's prestige plummeted to the point that he didn't have any prestige to speak of. Right now, even if Supreme True Marshal stood in front of everyone, they probably wouldn't have the slightest bit of respect for him. If Supreme True Marshal knew that the prestige he had accumulated over countless years had been completely destroyed by Feng Yongji in a single night, wouldn't he spit out blood? Alliance Leader, we strongly suggest that we immediately send out our troops to conquer the sacred race and devil race and unify the sacred world. Countless core members of the Human Race Alliance gathered in the Big Dipper Mountain's main hall. All of them looked at Murongyu with worship in their eyes. In the original Human Race Alliance, apart from a small number of people who felt a sense of belonging to the Alliance, the rest of them had only submitted because of the human race's strength. However, all of them now felt a strong sense of belonging. All of them felt that they were a part of the Human Race Alliance. This was the only benefit of a war. Although many people had died, it could strengthen the cohesion of a faction. This was because the allied forces of the sacred race and devil race were made up of the elite soldiers of the two races. After these soldiers were killed, the strength of the sacred race and devil race greatly decreased. Of course, their peak strength wasn't affected much. After all, these people were still in the chaos layer. As long as these people came down, the casualties of the sacred race and devil race would only be ordinary saints. In reality, it wouldn't affect them much. But now, the core members of the Human Race Alliance were all suggesting that Murongyu unify the sacred world. This was because they felt that this was the best opportunity. However, their suggestions were rejected by Murongyu immediately. This was because he received news from Xian Junhua after he recovered the lost territory of the human race and slaughtered the allied forces. Many sacred race and devil race experts on the saint rankings had already come down and returned to the sacred world. Originally, the agreement between the major factions of the sacred world was only for the previous war. That war had already ended when Murongyu recovered the lost territory and slaughtered the allied forces of the sacred race and devil race. After all, Murongyu didn't continue to send troops, and the sacred race and devil race didn't immediately send troops for revenge. After these people returned to the sacred world, the sacred race and devil race's strength had increased drastically. If the Human Race Alliance tried to conquer them with their current strength, they would only suffer heavy losses. Not to mention unifying the sacred world, they might even be wiped out. Murongyu didn't give them a detailed analysis of this. He only said that he had his own plans. This puzzled the core members, but they couldn't do anything about it. Right now, Murongyu's words carried weight. Even if they weren't satisfied, they felt that Murongyu's decision was correct. In reality, it wasn't that Murongyu didn't want to unify the sacred world. He was just biding his time. This was because recently, the 6 sacred lands were about to conquer the immemorial world. He was prepared to seize the immemorial world. He wanted to truly unify the human race before he could unify the saints' world. After all, he didn't want his own backyard to catch fire while he was unifying the sacred world. He didn't want to be stabbed by the true Marshal Sacred Hall and the others. If that happened, Murongyu would be greatly injured. Chapter 1750. Alliance Leader. There are several hundred humans outside who are all experts on the saint rankings requesting an audience. One day, an expert from the Great Alliance of the human races flew in from outside and found Murongyu. He reported to him in a hurry. Several hundred experts on the saint rankings? Murongyu's heart skipped a beat. Were they all here to join the Great Alliance of the human races? If that was the case, Murongyu would welcome them warmly. After all, although the Great Alliance of the human races was powerful, There were too few experts on the Saint rankings other than himself. They were not enough to fight against the Sacred Clan and the Demon Race. To put it bluntly, the Great Alliance of the human races would still be vulnerable without Murongyu. As a result, Murongyu strode out of the Big Dipper Mountain. During this process, Li Ling, Murong Xian, and the others who heard the news all follow behind Murongyu. Outside the endless fog on the Big Dipper Mountain, several hundred experts on the Saint rankings stood in the sky and looked at the Great Alliance of the human races calmly. All of their faces were filled with arrogance. All of a sudden, the layers of fog were torn apart as Murongyu and the others quickly walked out to greet them. Whoosh! All of their gazes immediately landed on Murongyu and the others before gathering on Murongyu's face. However, when they saw that Murongyu was only a rank 4 chaotic ancestor saint, most of them looked at him with disdain. The rest of them were expressionless. Seeing their reactions, Li Ling, Murong Xian, and the others who were originally excited and happy were immediately displeased. However, they were not hotheads. They just pretended not to see it and did not flare up. Everyone is a guest from afar. Please come into the alliance for a gathering. Murongyu obviously saw their reactions, but he pretended not to see them and said with a smile. Before Murongyu had even finished speaking, the leader of the several hundred experts on the Saint rankings stepped forward. With a single movement, he charged through the crack in the fog that had yet to recover. In the blink of an eye, the several hundred experts on the Saint rankings had all vanished. During this process, no one even opened their eyes to look at Murongyu and the others. What the hell? How dare you be so arrogant? Li Ling was the first to feel displeased as he cursed. The faces of the other experts of the Human Race Alliance turned ugly as well. They were all infuriated by these people. A cold light flashed in the depths of Murongyu's eyes, but he didn't say anything and just walked over. When they entered the interior of Big Dipper Mountain, they no longer saw the hundreds of experts on the Saint rankings. They all went to the main hall. Murong Xian said with a cold face. Thus, everyone flew towards the main hall. As soon as they entered the main hall, they saw a person sitting on the main seat. That was the seat of the Human Race Alliance. In other words, it was Murongyu's seat. Other than this person, several hundred other people also sat near the main seat, directly occupying the seats of Li Ling, Murong Xian, and the others. One must know that although the main hall was large, there were many seats. However, the closer one was to the main seat, the higher their status. Now, Murongyu and the others were all excluded by several hundred people. Murongyu, is it? Do it. From today onwards, the Human Race Alliance is under my control. In other words, I am now the alliance leader of the Human Race Alliance. As for you, you could be the deputy alliance leader. Sitting on the main seat, Yang Mao glanced at Murongyu and said indifferently. His eyes were full of mockery. How dare you not kneel when you see the alliance leader? Before Yang Mao finished speaking, an expert on the Saint rankings stood up and shouted at Murongyu and the others. At the same time, an extremely violent aura erupted from his body and suppressed Murongyu and the others like a raging wave. He wanted to suppress Murongyu and the others. Murongyu and the others were stunned. They were confused by Yang Mao and the other series of actions. However, they soon realized what was going on. How dare you? Do you know where you are? Get down here. Li Ling was furious. He reached out his large hand and shattered the void. He viciously smashed down at Yang Mao, who was sitting on the main seat and smiling coldly. Oof. The expert on the Saint rankings who had spoken earlier sneered. He took a step forward and threw a punch at Li Ling. Although Li Ling was also an expert on the Saint rankings, the expert on the Saint rankings could tell that Li Ling's strength was far inferior to his. Even so, he still unleashed his strongest attack. He wanted to kill Li Ling with one blow and achieve his goal of intimidating everyone. A shocking murderous intent flashed across Murongyu's eyes. He naturally knew the intention of the expert on the Saint rankings. Immediately, he was furious. Li Ling, kill this person. Furious, Murongyu directly transmitted his voice to Li Ling. Li Ling was not a fool. He could sense the difference between him and the expert on the Saint rankings. However, When he heard Murong use words, he did not hesitate to turn his spear around and viciously clawed at the expert on the Saint rankings. You overestimate yourself. The expert on the Saint rankings sneered, his eyes full of disdain. In the blink of an eye, the two attacks collided in the void. After a muffled bang, a cloud of blood mist exploded in the void. At the same time, it was accompanied by a shrill scream. The one who screamed was not Li Ling, but the expert on the Saint rankings. The moment their attacks collided, Li Ling unleashed a powerful aura that made the expert feel despair. He clawed his fist until it exploded. Die! While the expert on the Saint rankings was screaming, Li Ling roared and clawed at the expert on the Saint rankings' head. Then, a terrifying power spewed out from his palm. Before the expert on the Saint rankings could react, his head and soul had already been shattered. The expert on the Saint rankings was dead. Only then did the people on Yang Mao's side react. They all looked at Li Ling in disbelief. On their side, other than their boss, the expert on the Saint rankings who had been killed was definitely in the top 10. This person was one of Yang Mao's most loyal lackeys. However, they did not expect him to be killed here. Everything happened so quickly that even Yang Mao, who had always been protective of his subordinates, could not react in time to save him. By the time he reacted, the expert on the Saint rankings had already been killed. You're courting death. As Yang Mao came to his senses, so did the hundreds of experts on the Saint rankings. They all stood up at the same time and unleashed their strongest aura. They charged at Murong Yu like a storm, intending to kill Murong Yu and the others. Murong Yu only had a dozen people on his side. There was a huge gap between them and Yang Mao's side. However, none of them showed any fear on their faces. Before their aura could reach them, Murong Yu was already standing in front of Murong Xian and the others. Therefore, when the aura of Yang Mao and the other experts on the Saint rankings surged over like a torrent, it automatically swept to the side when it encountered Murong Yu. Behind Murong Yu, Murong Xian, Li Ling, and the others did not feel anything at all. Each and every one of them looked at Yang Mao and the others with disdain. Yang Mao exclaimed in surprise. He then signaled an expert on the Saint rankings next to him. Kill! The expert on the Saint rankings understood. With a roar, he threw a punch at Murong Yu's head. He wanted to kill Murong Yu with a single blow. Murong Yu shook his head. What an ignorant person. If you had pledged allegiance to the great alliance of humans, I would have welcomed you with open arms. But now, without saying a word, you want to seize my human race alliance and kill us. Didn't you investigate my strength before you returned to the Saint's world? Murong Yu smiled, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced at the expert on the Saint rankings who was charging at him. Plop! One look. Just one look. The expert on the Saint rankings fell limply to the ground, as if he had no bones in his body. In that moment, the aura of life of the expert on the Saint rankings dissipated. In other words, the expert on the Saint rankings was dead. Murong Yu had killed him with a single glance. Murong Yu had killed him with a single glance? Everyone on Yang Mao's side, including Yang Mao, was stunned by Murong Yu's gaze. The one who had died was an expert on the Saint rankings, and a powerful one at that. He wasn't an ordinary saint. How could he have been killed with a single glance? Even Yang Mao couldn't do that. For the first time, they took Murong Yu's strength seriously. Only now did they slightly believe that Murong Yu had the ability to kill the soul of a supreme being expert. Very good. With such strength, you can be my slave. Yang Mao stood up abruptly and looked at Murong Yu with gleaming eyes. Greed was written all over his face. This guy wants to control Murong Yu? Murong Xian and the others couldn't help but look at Yang Mao with disdain. It wasn't that they looked down on Yang Mao. In fact, even a supreme being couldn't control Murong Yu. After all, even a supreme being's soul wasn't as strong as Murong Yu's. Master, these idiots really make me speechless. I think that since they've delivered themselves to our doorstep, why don't we control them all? They'll only listen to us if they become our souls. Damn it, I want this bastard to be my slave. I'll torture him to death. Li Ling pointed at Yang Mao and cursed. Yang Mao's face turned ashen. His eyes flashed with hatred as he looked at Li Ling. Ever since he became an expert on the saint rankings, Li Ling was the first person who dared to speak to him like that. Morongyu nodded. He had wanted to treat them with courtesy. However, since they didn't want it, he might as well not give them any face. Hence, he began to attack. Domain. Morongyu roared in his heart. He immediately used the origin energy of the holy world to seal off the entire hall. Chapter 1751. Whoosh. The domain formed by the origin energy of the holy world enveloped the entire hall. At this moment, other than Murongyu's people, Yang Mao and the others felt a strong sense of danger. Immediately, their expressions changed drastically. However, at the same time their expressions changed, an indescribable force had already swiftly suppressed them. Thus, to their horror, they discovered that their powers were rapidly being suppressed. In just an instant, their strength was suppressed, and they could only display 50% of their usual strength. Moreover, their strength was rapidly declining. In Murongyu's domain, Morongyu was the master. With just a thought, he could do anything. Suppressing their strength was the most normal thing to do. Kill! Yang Mao immediately realized what was going on. With a furious roar, his figure blurred as he charged straight at Morongyu. He could tell at a glance that this was all because of Morongyu. Boom! Morongyu did not even make a move. He just waved his hand, and Yang Mao was sent flying with blood spurting out his mouth. He was no match for Morongyu. Everyone suppressed them. Morongyu was furious. These ignorant experts on the holy ranking had successfully angered him. Therefore, he did not show any mercy and directly slapped out. Puff! 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 Yang Mao and the others were slapped by Morongyu and spat out blood. They were slapped deep into the ground. Following that, Morongyu continued to act and sealed all of their powers. Yang Mao spat out a mouthful of blood when he saw that hundreds of his people could not even withstand a single blow. This was because he was too anxious. Originally, he wanted to control the great alliance of the human race and unify the holy world. However, he did not expect there to be such a huge gap between his strength and Morongyu's. Morongyu, I am the young palace master of the Extreme King Palace. They are all disciples of the Extreme King Palace. How dare you capture us? You're dead meat. If you know what's good for you, let us go. If you don't, the Extreme King Palace will make the entire human alliance disappear. Yang Mao looked at Morongyu as he spoke. You little asterisk shoal. If everyone in Extreme King Palace was as useless as you are, I could kill you all 1,000 times over. Li Ling stepped forward and stepped on Yang Mao's head, which had been sealed. Yang Mao's head was now on the ground. Then, he made a 360-degree turn and stomped Yang Mao's head into the ground. Little bastard, you're dead. This was an undisguised humiliation. Yang Mao was infuriated. He roared crazily. However, not only was his roar useless, it even made Li Ling increase his strength, trampling him until he wished he was dead. Awesome. Strength had long been unhappy with this fool. Now that he had trampled on this fellow, he felt a burst of pleasure. Then he suggested that Murongxian come up and have some fun. And so, Murongyu's people, with the exception of Morongyu, all stepped forward to stomp on Yang Mao. Arg! Yang Mao roared in grief and indignation. In the end, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. This was the 10th time he had fainted. Li Ling and the others hadn't done anything to him. They had just stepped on him. Yang Mao had fainted because they had humiliated him. You're dead meat. Before we came here, we had an agreement with the palace master. If we don't return in 3 days, they will lead the army of saints here. By then, your alliance will be doomed. One of Yang Mao's subordinates laughed wildly with a ferocious expression. However, his maniacal laughter quickly came to a halt, because he had already been stomped to the ground by Gu Kai. Ignorant things, remember your identity. Even if the human alliance is inferior to the Extreme King Palace, you will still die before us. Plus, do you think your Extreme King Palace is that strong? It's fine if they don't come. If they do, we'll destroy them. Gu Kai's words were domineering. Yang Mao's subordinates fell silent. Yes, they would die first. What was there to be happy about? But they were still disdainful. The human alliance was strong, but could it be stronger than the Extreme King Palace? The Extreme King Palace was one of the top 10 factions in the Chaos Layer. All right, after Murong Yu waved his hand to dismiss the crowd, he took control of the hundreds of Saint Leaderboard souls and turned them into Murong Yu's slaves. Murong Xian, Zhao Jiqing, and the other souls weren't strong enough. They couldn't control more Saint Leaderboards. So, Murong Yu had to do himself. At this point, Shenzhen had more than 1,000 Saint Leaderboards. Including Murong Yu and the other Saint Leaderboards, Shenzhen had more than 1,500 Saint Leaderboards. In other words, the number of experts on the Saint ranking in Glory Sect was about 1% of all the experts on the Saint ranking. If you didn't count the Saint Leaderboards in the Chaos Layer, Shenzhen was definitely the faction with the most Saint Leaderboards. Plus, the Human Alliance had dozens of Saint Leaderboards. This was definitely an extremely terrifying force. Once Murong Yu took control of all the Saint Hall assassins, it would be much easier for Murong Yu to unify the sacred world. After all, the Saint Hall assassins had about 1/10 of all the Saint Leaderboards. My lord, after his soul was controlled, Yang Mao's attitude took a 180-degree turn. At this moment, he was standing in front of Murong Yu with an incomparably respectful expression. Take us to the Extreme King Palace. At the same time, tell your father to gather all the Saint Leaderboards in the Extreme King Palace. I want to capture them all. Murong Yu's eyes flashed coldly. Whether it was controlling the immemorial world or unifying the sacred world, Murong Yu needed a large number of Saint Leaderboards. Now that the Extreme King Palace had come knocking, it was exactly what Murong Yu wanted. Attacking the Extreme King Palace was also the first part of Murong Yu's all-out war against the sacred world. Without any hesitation, Yang Mao sent a message to his father, the Palace Master of the Extreme King Palace. And so, the Palace Master of the Extreme King Palace began to gather the Saint Leaderboards scattered throughout the Chaos Layer. 3 days later, Murong Yu brought Yang Mao, Murong Xian, Li Ling, and the other core members of Shenzhen out of the Human Alliance. They charged into the Chaos Layer. This was the first time Murong Xian and the others had entered the Chaos Layer. Although they expressed their curiosity, they didn't do anything overboard. This was because they weren't here to travel. They were here to attack the Extreme King Palace. The Extreme King Palace was also in the Chaos City. As one of the 10 great factions of the Sacred World, the Extreme King Palace was far from the Sacred Execution Hall and the Primal Chaos Sect, but was still extremely terrifying. They had a huge territory in the Chaos City. At this moment, under Yang Mao's lead, Murong Yu calmly walked into the Extreme King Palace. Murong Xian and the other Saint Leaderboards experts were scattered all around the palace to prevent any of them from escaping. In the hall, the Palace Master of the Extreme King Palace, a middle-aged man with a dignified aura, sat on the main seat. He looked at Yang Mao excitedly. Yang Mao, you've successfully taken control of the Human Alliance? All the Saint Leaderboards experts of the Extreme King Palace have gathered. As long as we descend and unify the sacred world, we'll be able to take the endless cultivation resources of the sacred world. Yang Mao had sent a message to the Palace Master of the Extreme King Palace, Yang En, saying that he had taken control of the Human Alliance and could send troops to unify the sacred world. The people of the Chaos Layer could not interfere with the struggles of any faction in the sacred world. It was because of this that they wanted to take control of the Human Alliance and use it as a shell to unify the sacred world. In reality, many factions wanted to do this, but the Extreme King Palace was one step ahead of them. That's right. I've successfully taken control of the Human Alliance. Yang Mao did not speak. The one who spoke was Murong Yu. At this moment, Yang Mao even took the initiative to stand behind Murong Yu with a respectful expression. Who are you? What are you doing, Yang Mao? Seeing Murong Yu, a mere primal chaos ancestor sage, act so rudely while Yang Mao acted so respectfully, Yang En was immediately enraged. I am the leader of the human alliance, Murong Yu. Speak. Do you want to submit and become my slave, or do I want to take control of your soul? Facing the dozens of core experts of the extreme king palace in the hall, Murong Yu was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled as he spoke. Father, I've already submitted to the Lord. So, I advise you to submit as well. A wise man submits to circumstances. That's what you always tell others. You can't unify the sacred world and the chaos layer. Only the Lord has the ability to do so. Yang Mao suddenly spoke. However, the first thing he said was to persuade his father to submit. This infuriated Yang, and ignorant. Yang roared angrily and struck out with his palm, aiming at Yang Mao. From the looks of it, he wanted to kill Yang Mao with a single slap. Yang was much stronger than Yang Mao. If it was in the past, Yang Mao would have revealed a look of fear. But now, his expression did not change. This was because he knew that although his father was strong, he was far from Murong Yu. Father, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Yang Mao spoke again. This time his father was fuming. Murong Yu could not help but laugh. This guy's brain seemed to have a screw loose. What a joke. However, Murong Yu still made a move. He did not have time to waste. At this time, the 6 sacred lands were about to conquer the immemorial world. Bang! Murong Yu's fist shot out. First come, first served, it collided with Yang An's large hand and shattered it. While Yang An was still in shock, Murong Yu had already turned his fist into a claw and smashed towards Yang An. Yang An was shocked, but his reaction was not slow. He directly fought with Murong Yu. However, his strength was still a little lacking compared to Feng Sangxiong, who had the phoenix plume nether spear. Under Murong Yu's full strength, he was knocked to the ground by Murong Yu in a few moves. Chapter 1752. Yang An had been suppressed. Yang An was shocked beyond belief. The moment Yang An was suppressed, the rest of the extreme King Palace experts in the hall began to attack. Every single one of them unleashed their strongest attacks at Murong Yu in an attempt to kill him. However, even though these people were strong, there was still a huge gap between their strength and Yang An's. How could they possibly be a match for Murong Yu? In fact, Murong Yu didn't even need to attack. Instead, he used the origin energy of the holy world to suppress them to the ground. Who are you? Yang An suppressed the shock in his heart as he looked at Murong Yu with a dark expression. Murong Yu smiled faintly as he sat on Yang An's seat. He didn't answer Yang An's question. Instead, he glanced at the crowd. Boom! Suddenly, a terrifying aura erupted from Murong Yu's body. With his body as the center, it swept out in all directions like a tidal wave. Wherever it passed, large pieces of the void would shatter. At this moment, the disciples that had gathered in the extreme King Palace didn't even have time to react. Their entire bodies were pressed to the ground by this terrifying aura, unable to move an inch. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was at this moment that Murong Xian, Li Ling, and the other Shenzhen experts who had been hiding outside the extreme King Palace moved. One by one, they rushed in from the outside. Then, they quickly took action and sealed those who had been suppressed. Then, they grabbed them all and threw them into a huge square. Master, this extreme King Palace is no ordinary faction. They have around 5,000 experts on the holy rankings. After doing all this, Li Ling and the others entered the hall. Li Ling reported to Murong Yu with a smile on his face. What do you mean by they're experts on the holy rankings? From today onwards, those people will be our Shenzhen's saint ranking experts. I think, as long as we subdue them, our Shenzhen will be one of the top 10 forces in the primal chaos layer, right? Murong chuckled, his eyes gleaming. At this moment, Yang An was no longer shocked, nor did he show any signs of anger. Hearing Murong's words, he couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain. He couldn't guarantee that everyone in the extreme King Palace would be loyal to him. However, most of them would rather die than submit. If that were the case, it would be impossible for Shenzhen to recruit all of them. Even if Murong Yu and the others could control the experts on the saint rankings, how many could they control? It was precisely because of this that Yang and felt disdain. Of course, this was before he knew about Murong Yu's terrifying soul. Otherwise, how would he dare to do this? Murong Yu, let me go. Our Extreme King Palace is willing to join the Human Race Alliance. I only need to be a Vice Alliance leader. All of our experts on the Saint rankings can go down to the Holy World and help you unify the Holy World. When the time comes, I only need half of the benefits. After laughing disdainfully, Yang'an suddenly said this. Yang'an, do you think I'll agree to your request? Murong Yu looked at Yang'an with an amused expression. Yang'an immediately sneered. Without our help, you won't be able to unify the Holy World. Besides, our cooperation will only bring you benefits and no harm. Murong Yu shook his head. From today onwards, the Extreme King Palace no longer exists. You, including Yang'an, will all become Shenzhen's disciples. Yang'an sneered. If you don't want to cooperate with us, there's no need to talk about anything else. Our Extreme King Palace will never join Shenzhen and become your subordinates. Is that so? A strange smile appeared on Murong Yu's face as he looked at the dozens of Extreme King Palace's core disciples that had been suppressed to the ground, unable to move. Do you think so too? Hearing Murong Yu's question, the dozens of people immediately climbed up from the ground. Then, under Yang'an's incredulous gaze, they bowed respectfully to Murong Yu and said respectfully, Holy Master, that's what Yang'an thinks. We don't dare to agree. Yang'an looked at these people in disbelief. He was about to vomit blood. He couldn't understand why these people would betray him so quickly. Murong Yu didn't even threaten them, nor did he give them any benefits. In reality, what Yang'an didn't know was that when Murong Yu spoke to him, he was already secretly controlling these people's souls. With Murong Yu's current strength, controlling them couldn't be easier, and he could do it without anyone noticing. But Yang'an wasn't an ordinary person, and he quickly reacted. He looked at Murong Yu in shock and said, You controlled them? Murong Yu nodded. Yang'an's face suddenly turned pale and bloodless. Murong Yu's strength was beyond his expectations. Murong Yu's soul, in particular, was terrifying. But Yang'an still felt lucky. He didn't think Murong Yu could control the entire Extreme King Palace. But Murong Yu seemed to want to attack him. With a wave of his hand, everyone disappeared from the hall. When they reappeared, they were in the middle of a plaza in the Extreme King Palace. At this moment, all the sealed experts on the Saint rankings were thrown onto the square. There were about 5,000 of them. Without saying a word, Murong Yu's vast sea of soul began to shake violently. Streaks of soul power tore through space, and like a flood, they quickly covered the entire plaza. Under Yang'an's shocked gaze, the Saint rankings of the Extreme King Palace were all being controlled. He knew these people were being controlled. That was because Murong Yu had removed the seals and restrictions on him the moment he fell under his control. Then, these people stood respectfully in front of Murong Yu. They lowered their heads and didn't say a word. In less than an hour, all 5,000 Saint rankings of the Extreme King Palace had been controlled. Because Yang'an had already gathered all the Saint rankings of the Extreme King Palace, it could be said that the entire Extreme King Palace had been wiped out. At this moment, only Yang'an wasn't under Murong Yu's control. This made Yang'an feel extremely sorrowful. Yang'an, do you want to die? Or do you want to live? If you want to live, recognize me as your master. Otherwise, you will die. Murong Yu looked at Yang'an coldly. His eyes were cold. Yang'an's heart trembled. He could see the murderous intent in Murong Yu's eyes. He didn't doubt that Murong Yu would do what he said. Father, the Master will go to the Holy Realm with us. He will become the Master of Primal Chaos. If we follow the Master, our future will be even greater. Yang Mao spoke again, trying to persuade Yang'an. Yang'an's heart was very conflicted. To be honest, he didn't want to die. Anyone who had lived to this point and had the strength to do so didn't want to die. But he didn't want to become someone else's slave. Father, the Master has been very good to us. He would never send us to our deaths. On the surface, we are his slaves, but in reality, he doesn't treat us as slaves. We have all the benefits that we deserve. And because of our relationship with the Master, he sees us as his confidants. Father, you really need to think this through. Young Mao continued to persuade him. Yang was very conflicted. He was very hesitant. After hesitating for a long time, Yang finally opened up his soul space to Murongyu. From this moment onwards, the Extreme Emperor Palace, one of the top 10 factions in the Primal Chaos layer, was only in name. They had all become Shenzhen's disciples. It was also from this moment onwards that Shenzhen went from a small faction in the Holy Realm to one of the top 10 factions in the Primal Chaos layer. If the assassins of the Saint Execution Hall were included, Shenzhen was without a doubt the strongest faction in the Holy Realm. Of course, this was under the condition that an autarch didn't appear. Otherwise, all of Murongyu's advantages would become useless overnight. Murongyu even had a feeling. He could feel that an autarch was about to appear. There was no reason for it. He just had this feeling. If an autarch appeared, Murongyu wouldn't have any advantages. Although the Mountain Sea Secret Realm was good, the Mountain Sea Scripture was only an autarch artifact. It couldn't suppress a real autarch. Therefore, Murongyu wanted to take over the immemorial world. The immemorial world was an independent space left behind from the immemorial era. There were countless heavenly resources inside. Once it was closed, even an autarch would find it difficult to break in. Oh, the immemorial world actually has an owner? After Murongyu subdued the Extreme Emperor Palace, he received a message from the saint-ranking slaves he had planted in the Sacred Lands. At this moment, the 6 Sacred Lands were facing a huge challenge. They were originally advancing in a straight line, but they suddenly encountered an extremely powerful, vicious beast. The vicious beast seemed to be the king of the immemorial world. Its strength was comparable to the first on the saint ranking. As soon as they came into contact, the 6 Sacred Lands suffered heavy losses. If it weren't for the autarch artifact, the 6 Sacred Lands would have been smacked to death. However, under such circumstances, the 6 Sacred Lands were unable to kill the vicious Beast King. Everyone from the 6 Sacred Lands was forced to hide in a large array by the vicious Beast King. They couldn't even leave the immemorial world. Equivalent to the first on the saint ranking, Murongyu frowned slightly. Although he was powerful now, he wasn't confident that he could kill the first on the saint ranking. However, he was determined to get the immemorial world. Even if the vicious Beast King was only the first on the saint ranking, he would kill it even if it was an autarch. Immediately, Murongyu put everyone from the Extreme Emperor Palace into the Hichu Luoshu and disappeared in a flash. Of course, before he left, Murongyu must have looted all of the Extreme King Palace's treasures. What Murongyu didn't know was that not long after he left with everyone from the Extreme Emperor Palace, the various factions in the Chaos Layer discovered that the Extreme Emperor Palace had disappeared into thin air. Thus, all sorts of rumors spread. Some said that the Extreme Emperor Palace had been wiped out by an autarch. Some said that the Extreme Emperor Palace had been swallowed by a chaos beast, leaving no survivors. While everyone was guessing, Murongyu had already teleported into the immemorial world with the Shenzhen Saint ranking powerhouses. Chapter 1753. In a large valley in the primordial world, all the disciples of the 6 great sacred lands were gathered in this huge valley. They had the advantage in numbers and were very powerful. However, the disciples of the 6 great sacred lands did not look too good. Their faces were extremely gloomy. Some of them even looked out of the valley in panic. Boom, boom, boom. Similar explosions were heard continuously. Although the huge impact did not directly affect the disciples of the 6 great sacred lands. Although the impact did not affect them directly, it still shook their hearts. In fact, the void above their heads was shattered into pieces. However, the powerhouses of the 6 great sacred lands had joined forces to set up a super formation to protect the entire valley. This allowed them to avoid being killed by the primordial beasts. However, the formation could not protect them for a lifetime. They could not leave the valley at all, not to mention rushing out of the primordial world. At this moment, Feng Yongji and the other leaders of the 6 great sacred lands were gathered in a tent. However, their faces were extremely gloomy and murderous. "Everyone, do you have any ideas?" Feng Yongji glanced at the others and asked in a deep voice. Bai Luo and the others looked at each other. How could they have any ideas? The king of beasts outside was just too powerful. Even though the leaders of the 6 great sacred lands had each summoned their supreme weapons, they were still no match for it. In the previous battle with the king of beasts, the 6 of them had even summoned their supreme weapons. However, they could not withstand a single blow and were sent flying by a single slap from the king of beasts. They were almost severely injured. At this moment, they had an instinctive fear of the king of beasts. Moreover, the king of beasts were extremely intelligent. They only surrounded and attacked them, preventing them from carrying out the decapitation operation. Moreover, even if all the powerhouses of the 6 great sacred lands joined forces, they would not be able to kill it. This was because the king of beasts had already escaped. Are we going to give up on the primordial world just like that? Bai Luo said unwillingly. The entire primordial world was extremely vast and had countless treasures of heaven and earth. Along the way, they didn't explore other places at all. Even so, their harvest was extremely terrifying. If they could kill the king of beasts and control the primordial world, the harvest of the 6 great sacred lands would definitely be even more terrifying. Impossible. Before Bai Luo could finish her words, Feng Yongji and the other 4 immediately denied it. Gabriella couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Then think of a way to kill that feral king. Otherwise, if this drags on for too long, our Saint Crystals and Saint Veins will be exhausted, and we will all die. Feng Yongji and the other 4 fell silent. If they had a way, they would have killed that feral king a long time ago. Why wait until now? A bunch of trash that can't even deal with a ferocious beast? The faces of the 10 holy lands have all been thrown away by you. At this moment, a sneer suddenly sounded in the tent. The expressions of Feng Yongji and the other 5 changed abruptly. Yuan Wei Yi, the sect master of the Rising Sky sect, even shouted, "Who is it? How dare you eavesdrop?" What they were discussing was confidential. Apart from the 6 of them, no one else had the right to know. But now someone was eavesdropping, and he even called them trash? This naturally infuriated them. However, at the same time, they were also surprised and unsettled. This was because they all felt a sense of familiarity. However, he couldn't remember who it was. Soon after, they found out who it was. At this moment, a figure appeared out of thin air in the tent and appeared in their line of sight. Morongyu. When they saw that person, Feng Yongji and the other 5 could not help but exclaim in unison. They were in the primordial world. Apart from the 6 of them, no one else knew how to enter or leave. However, how did Morongyu come in? Could there be a spy among the 6 of them? This thought flashed through their minds in a flash. However, they did not have time to criticize the other 5 and made their moves. Almost at the same time, they unleashed their strongest attacks at Morongyu. Seeing the 6 of them unleashing their strongest attacks to kill him without any reason, a cold killing intent flashed in Morongyu's eyes. However, he did not react. Instead, he continued to look at Feng Yongji and the other 4 with a sneer on his face. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the 6 people's strongest attacks landed on Morongyu's body. However, what shocked the 6 of them was that Morongyu's expression did not change at all. He was still standing on the same spot. So powerful. Feng Yongji and the other 5 looked terrified. In fact, although the 6 of them were all experts in the top 100 of the holy rankings, the gap between them and Morongyu was too great. Now, Morongyu did not even need to use the Akalanatha seal to easily resist them. Under their shocked gazes, Morongyu took a step forward and slowly walked toward Feng Yongji, who was sitting on the main seat. Feng Yongji was shocked. What are you trying to do? Morongyu didn't say a word as he walked straight over. Whoosh! Feng Yongji was frightened by Morongyu. Before Morongyu could get close, he flew away in a flash. Seeing this, a mocking smile appeared on Morongyu's face. Then he boldly sat on the main seat. Then, He looked at Feng Yongji, who was not far away. Little Feng, as expected of the temple master of the true martial temple. You know my heart so well that you automatically gave up your seat for me? Feng Yongji's face was red as he looked at Murongyu angrily. How'd he give up his seat? He was clearly afraid that Murongyu would suddenly attack him, so he dodged. Murongyu, how dare you? Do you know where this is? Bai Luo was furious and looked at Murongyu with murderous intent. In fact, you could even see the intense greed in her eyes. Feng Yongji and the others were also afraid of Murongyu's strength. On the other hand, they coveted Murongyu's physical body. Isn't this the Archean world? Oh, right, you're talking about this valley, right? If I say that this valley and the entire Archean world belongs to our Shenzhen, would you believe me? Murongyu smiled as he looked at Feng Yongji and the others. Believe my ass. Bao Boming, the leader of the Nine Cauldrons sect, shouted and was about to attack. However, at this moment, Murongyu's face turned cold. You'd better put away your supreme weapons. Otherwise, I can guarantee that you will die a horrible death. As it turned out, these 6 shameless fellows had secretly taken out their supreme weapons while they were talking. They wanted to use the power of their supreme weapons to kill Murongyu in one fell swoop. However, how could Murongyu not notice their shameless actions? Since they had been seen through, Feng Yongji and the others did not have to hide anymore. They all took out their supreme weapons. Murongyu was not afraid at all. He only said calmly, "Before we attack, let me show you something." As he spoke, the tent they were in automatically turned to dust. Feng Yongji and the others did not know what Murongyu was up to. Hence, they looked around. It was fine if they did not look, but when they did, they were almost scared to death. In the sky above the valley, there were many experts who were emitting powerful auras. The auras that these experts emitted were very powerful. They were all experts on the Saint rankings. However, what shocked Feng Yongji and the others was not the aura that these experts emitted, but the number of experts on the Saint rankings. There were more than 6,000, almost 7,000 of them. 7,000 experts on the Saint rankings. What kind of concept was this? In an instant, Feng Yongji and the others were in a mess. Where did so many experts on the Saint rankings come from? There was no need to ask. They must have been brought here by Murongyu. However, why did Murongyu have so many experts on the Saint rankings? Looking at the situation, the top 10 forces in the chaos layer should be like this, right? What made them speechless was that among the experts on the Saint rankings, there were also people who had taken out their supreme weapons. These supreme weapons were all supreme weapons that they were extremely familiar with. It was none other than the supreme artifact that Murongyu had forcefully snatched from them. Now, Murongyu's people were actually using their supreme weapons to deal with them. This made Feng Yongji and the others feel depressed. Moreover, they saw unparalleled Palace Master Lin Gyun and Purple Thunderhalt Master Su Tianyu among the experts on the Saint rankings. However, from the looks of it, these two people seemed to be stronger than before. They seemed to have improved. If they dared to attack, Zhao Jiqing and the others who had supreme weapons would definitely attack first. This was because Feng Yongji and the others already felt that they were locked on by the divine consciousness of 6,000 to 7,000 experts on the Saint rankings. How is it? Oh, controllers? How is my Shenzhen's development? How is it any different from your 6 great sacred grounds? Murongyu looked at Feng Yongji with a smile. Damn you! Aren't you making fun of us? You can be said to be the #1 force in the holy world. Feng Yongji and the others cursed in their hearts. Disciples of the 6 great sacred grounds, put down your weapons and kneel with your hands on your head. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. At this moment, a thunderous voice boomed in the valley. Perhaps it was because of this voice, the 6,000 to 7,000 experts on the Saint rankings all unleashed their terrifying auras and suppressed them. Plop, plop, plop. Immediately, countless saints from the 6 great sacred grounds were suppressed to the point where they could not even move. In the end, apart from the 6 great controllers, everyone else was suppressed. At this moment, Feng Yongji and the others were sweating profusely. Murongyu was just too powerful. They were no match for him at all. In fact, they did not even have the chance to escape. Now, they only had two choices. Submit to Murong-yu, become Murong-yu's slave, or die. In fact, Feng Yongji and the others were very nervous. Their actions of abandoning the human race had already caused them to be despised by the entire human race. Even if they were willing to become Murong-yu's slave, they did not know if Murong-yu would want them. Or perhaps, Murong-yu would just kill them to comfort the injured human race saints. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.